a modern city suddenly appeared on the border of a medieval empire. The soldiers inside didn't just use AK-47s. Even steam trains ran all over the streets. All because I transmigrated to become the poorest frontier baron in the Valoria Empire. To avoid starving to death in the Middle Ages, I led the serfs to brew moonshine to earn my first pot of gold. It took me many years to finally develop this territory into a paradise on earth. Every commoner in the territory has a ruddy complexion, there are no beggars, and even the streets are packed densely with shops. Just as I was preparing to flex my muscles and ruthlessly fleece a wave of foreign merchants, the current emperor, Richard, suddenly brought his chief chamberlain, Godfrey, to Edenbrook for an incognito inspection. The carriage creaked and swayed on the dilapidated mountain road. Godfrey held a parchment map, his face full of disgust. "Your Majesty, this Edenbrook is so remote and the journey so bumpy. It must be an unimaginably small, impoverished backwater." Richard closed his eyes and sighed. "This road is truly too rotten. I should have ridden a horse if I had known." Thump! Before he could finish speaking, the carriage jolted violently. Godfrey was bounced high up, his head crashing heavily against the oak boards of the carriage roof. Richard only avoided falling by gripping the armrest tightly. Godfrey clutched his head, scrambled out of the carriage, and cursed at the coachman. "Are you blind? You startled my master. They'll send you to the gallows." The coachman aggrievedly extended a finger, pointing tremblingly ahead. Godfrey looked in the direction of the finger, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. He rubbed his eyes hard, looked back at the muddy dirt road they came from, and then looked at what was in front of them. A perfectly straight, flat, and completely level black-gray avenue lay before everyone. It even reflected a strange luster in the sunlight. Both sides were even tightly wrapped with neat stone blocks. That's right, this was exactly the asphalt road I had created. Richard frowned and climbed out of the carriage, freezing on the spot. "Godfrey, are you sure this is the territory of Edenbrook?" Godfrey opened the map and nodded vigorously. "Yes, master. This is the place." The carriage drove onto the avenue, so smooth that not a single bump could be felt. As a gentle breeze blew across the lush green farmlands on both sides, Richard's brow completely relaxed. For a mere frontier baron to build such a fine road, how interesting. Following the avenue forward, Richard and Godfrey were dumbfounded once again. On the distant horizon, a solid fortress towering over a dozen meters high suddenly appeared. The grayish-white city walls exuded a cold, majestic aura, and 3 giant ornate letters were carved above the city gate. Edenbrook. Richard immediately flared up. Having fought wars year after year, he had never seen a minor baron's territory possess this level of defense. He suppressed his anger and growled, "Godfrey, there is such an impregnable city within the Empire's territory. Why did the Royal Intelligence Network under your command fail to report this?" Godfrey was so terrified he knelt right on the asphalt road, frantically kissing Richard's boots. He hadn't even heard of this godforsaken place. Who would have thought a monster-level fortress was hidden deep in these old mountains? Richard sighed helplessly, had Godfrey dismissed the coachman, and the two walked towards the city gate. Just as they reached the entrance, 3 guards in uniform blocked their way, demanding to see their transit documents. Godfrey handed over the documents, lying that his master was in the porcelain business. Richard took the opportunity to test the waters. "These city walls are so tall and sturdy, they must have cost a lot of gold coins, right? Did the Lord increase your tithe?" A guard in the back immediately laughed out loud, reaching out his hand to his companion and shouting, "Pay up, pay up! I told you he would ask this." The guard who asked the question rolled his eyes, pulled out a few copper coins from a leather pouch, handed them over, and then turned to explain to Richard, "These walls are just for show. The outside is pasted with stone slabs, and the patterns are all carved on. Our Lord Silas thought dirt walls were ugly, so he just threw this together. It didn't cost much." Richard laughed heartily after hearing this, secretly thinking this Baron Silas was quite a refined man who understood art. In a great mood, he signaled Godfrey to take out a silver coin as a tip. As a result, the guard's face instantly changed, and he sternly shouted, "What are you doing? Take it away. We don't do bribery here in Edenbrook." Godfrey held the silver coin, unsure whether to take it back or hand it over, muttering in his heart, "Are there really guards in this world who aren't greedy for money? This is ridiculous." The two walked into the city and fell silent again. A clean stone-paved road stretched out endlessly, lined with shops on both sides, with the sounds of street hawkers ringing non-stop in their ears. Most importantly, every commoner on the street had a rosy complexion and looked full of energy. There were simply so many fat people. This standard of living was who knows how many tiers higher than the outer city of the royal capital. As it got late, the two walked to a spacious inn called Traveler's Rest. A small official imperial seal was even carved in the corner of the signboard. Richard stepped inside, and the plump boss warmly greeted them. "Are you two masters staying the night? First class suite is 5 gold coins, second class is 3 gold coins, third class is 1 gold coin. 5 gold coins a night." Godfrey blew his top. "Are you running a robber's den, specifically butchering out-of-towners?" The boss waved his hands repeatedly. This is an official indirectly operated by the Lord. Lord Silas named it himself. During the peak season when merchants come to stock up, you might not even be able to snatch a third-class room. Hearing that the Lord ran the inn, Richard directly slapped down 5 gleaming gold coins and booked a first-class room. A waiter led the two up to the second floor, poured 2 cups of tea, and said attentively, "Try this, you too. Our Edenbrook water is famous for being clear and sweet. If you need anything, we'll rope at the door. I'm on call." Richard picked up the teacup. The pale yellow tea was crystal clear. Godfrey took a sip first, and his eyes instantly lit up. It has a strange herbal fragrance, far superior to the tea drunk by those nobles in the royal capital. Richard followed suit and took a big gulp. It was indeed sweet and crisp. Just then, Godfrey strolled into the inner washroom and suddenly let out a pig-slaughtering scream. "Master, there's a well in this room." Richard rushed over. He saw Godfrey with his rear sticking up, leaning over a white ceramic vessel, clicking his tongue in wonder. "Look, master, such a large white porcelain vessel is too luxurious to be used as a water well mouth. It's just that the mouth of the well is a bit small." As Godfrey spoke, he scooped up a handful of clear water from inside and drank it straight down. Good water, truly clear, sweet, and crisp. Richard looked at this bizarre ceramic device, always feeling something wasn't quite right, and quickly had Godfrey pull the rope to call the waiter. As soon as the waiter came up, Godfrey pointed to the well and asked, "Why is there a well in this room?" The waiter smiled, accustomed to the sight. "Masters, this is not a well, it's a flush toilet, used for relieving oneself. There's a rope connected to a hidden water tank above it. Once you're done, you pull the rope, and the filth is washed away." Godfrey's smile instantly froze on his face, standing there dumbstruck as if struck by lightning. Richard's eyes were like knives, staring dead at Godfrey. Godfrey's face turned purple, and he forced himself to ask, "Where does it flush to?" The waiter looked proud. "We built underground pipes for the whole city. The terrain is high, so it flushes fast. Finally, we use special water carts to transfer it to the neighboring territory." Our Baron said, "Cesspools must be kept far away from Edenbrook, otherwise, dirty water will seep into the ground, and the well water will taste bitter. Our Edenbrook's water is just that good. Even the nobles from the neighboring territory come here specifically to buy our water to drink." Godfrey's stomach churned violently. Unable to suppress it any longer, he threw himself over the toilet and vomited wildly. The waiter clapped excitedly. "Yes, yes, yes, that's exactly how many merchants throw up when they've drunk too much hard liquor." After throwing up, Godfrey glared viciously at the waiter. The waiter calmly pulled the rope, and water rushed down with a splash, flushing the toilet completely clean. Richard watched in amazement and asked again, "Then how is the cleanup handled after relieving oneself?" The waiter pulled out a brass faucet with a handle from behind the toilet. "This is a water gun, filled with salt water. The Baron said salt water cleans the backside the best." Then he opened a wooden hidden compartment, revealing a stack of soft white paper. "Our inn provides this kind of paper for wiping. Absolutely do not use the traditional rough wood chips. Our lord thinks those things are unsanitary. Previously, someone secretly used wood chips, got caught by our guard Captain Brutus, and had his buttocks directly sewn up. Brutus has boundless strength. If you run into him, make sure to stay far away." After hearing this, Richard and Godfrey simultaneously clenched their buttocks. That night, the two stared at the water tank on the ceiling and the white paper, sleepless all night. The next morning, after a delicious breakfast, Richard took Godfrey for a stroll on the streets. Godfrey was still frantically muttering, harshly criticizing my extravagant ways and wasting the people's wealth. Richard gave a cold snort, saying that if all the lords across the empire could be this extravagant and the commoners prosperous, he, the emperor, would wake up laughing in his sleep. Walking to a street corner, the two saw an uncle selling tea, singing a strange folk tune at the top of his lungs. "Oh, Edenbrook sweet tea is sweeter than honey. I fell in love with you after just one sip." Godfrey frowned at the sound, feeling the tune dirted his ears, and spat a glob of phlegm directly onto the stone-paved ground. Just as he spat, an old lady wearing a red armband that said sanitation supervisor darted out from nowhere, extended her hand with 5 fingers spread wide, and shouted shrilly, "Spitting anywhere, fine of 5 copper coins. The Baron's rules, if you refuse, go see the judge at the Lord's court." Just as Godfrey was about to flare up, Richard paid the money outright. Richard casually asked the old lady, "Old madam, I see that Edenbrook doesn't have a single beggar?" The old lattice wrinkled face broke into a smile. "Our lord is kind-hearted and can't bear to see poor people, so he hauled them all off to the mines to dig trenches." Richard almost choked to death on his own breath. "You call this kind-hearted?" Right then, shouts came from the street. "There's a lawsuit. Hurry to the court to watch the fun." Richard and Godfrey followed the crowd, jogging all the way to the Lord's Hall. Looking up, the hall occupied a vast area. The 3-story-high grayish-white stone building exuded a cold, majestic presence, with a huge plaza in front of its doors. This grand scale was even more imposing than the city hall in the royal capital. At this time, I was slumped impatiently behind the long oak table of the judge's seat. I had just woken up and could barely keep my eyes open. Kneeling below was Tom, the tavern owner, pointing at the guard Rufus next to him, crying and complaining. "My lord, Rufus ate at my place without paying, smashed 2 barrels of my good ale, and owes 17 silver coins he won't pay back." Upon hearing this, my anger flared up immediately. I had repeatedly ordered the guards not to oppress the commoners, and this kid dared to commit a crime against the wind. "Rufus, you owe money and won't pay?" I slammed the gavel. Rufus was so scared he dropped to his knees with a thud. "My lord, I really have no money left. I drank too much that day, and I still owe the casino 10 silver coins. Guards, give him 20 military cane strokes first." As soon as my voice fell, Rufus took off his leather armor himself, bit it in his mouth, and obediently lay face down on the ground. 20 strokes of the cane beat his back to a bloody pulp. I coldly announced, "Salary halved for this month. Go sweep the streets for 3 months. Reoffend, and you'll be banished from Edenbrook." Pale-faced, Rufus actually smiled. "Thank you for your mercy, my lord." Watching from the crowd, Richard's pupils quaked. This baron slouched without posture and judged cases like child's play, but his prestige was terrifying. The person beaten had no complaints, not even a thought of resistance. Tom spoke up weakly at this time. "My lord, my money." I spread my hands. "You saw it, he has no money." Tom's face instantly collapsed, looking as if he had lost his parents. I changed my tone. "However, this baron cannot let the good people of the territory suffer losses. Tonight, I will go to your tavern and penalize myself with 3 cups of ale to help you boost your popularity." Court dismissed. Upon hearing this, Tom was instantly ecstatic, bowing repeatedly. "Thank you, my lord." As I left the court, I glanced at the periphery, having long set my sights on those 2 unfamiliar fat sheep. At dusk, I brought Brutus and my maid Tessa to Tom's tavern. As soon as we went up to the 2nd floor, I saw Richard and Godfrey sitting at the top of the stairs. I gave Brutus a look. Brutus sank his breath to his lower abdomen and let out a furious roar. Tonight's consumption for the whole venue will be paid for by Lord Silas. The diners on the 2nd floor charged downstairs joyously. Tom tried to shoo Richard away, but Godfrey adamantly refused to budge. I walked straight over, sat down at their table, and smilingly took off my hat in greeting. 2 unfamiliar faces, mind sharing a table? Richard gave a fake name, Sir Richard, claiming to be in the porcelain business from the royal capital. Upon hearing this, I immediately switched to business mode. "My Edenbrook ceramic flush toilets are absolutely unmatched. Would you 2 like to order some goods?" Richard picked up his teacup, took a light sip, and sighed. "Edenbrook is indeed an eye-opener. Take this tea alone. I'm afraid even His Majesty the Emperor in the royal palace cannot taste it." As soon as he finished speaking, I slammed the table, stood up abruptly, my face full of deep sorrow and indignation. "Shut up, Sir Richard. You must not speak nonsense. How dare you slander His Majesty?" Richard was stunned by my roar. With tears in my eyes, I spoke with surging passion. "The peace of the Empire is entirely due to His Majesty's personal military campaigns to repel the barbarians back in the day. Without His Majesty, there would be no Edenbrook. But today, if even His Majesty, far away in the royal capital, cannot drink this tea, how do I have the face to drink it anymore?" After speaking, I ruthlessly splashed the tea in my cup onto the carpet, tilted my head back, and shouted, "May God bless our emperor." Richard's hand holding the teacup froze in midair, completely stiffened. Godfrey's eyeballs almost fell out next to him. Even he, the chief steward of the royal court, felt inferior to this long-distance bootlicking skill. I turned to stare at Godfrey. This gentleman, love and respect for His Majesty the Emperor must be kept in the heart. How many nobles in the royal capital circles are hypocritical, no different from beasts? Godfrey guiltily glanced at Richard, and stifling his grievance, he shouted along, "The Baron is right. May God bless our Emperor." Richard's face was ruddy, and his look towards me became much more favorable. The atmosphere was set, and I revealed my true intentions. If this tea were brought to the royal capital, the princes and nobles would definitely snatch it all up. "Are you 2 interested?" Richard smoothly asked the price. I held up one finger. 10 gold coins for 1 ounce of tea. Godfrey blurted out, "That's too expensive." I sneered and started giving them a modern marketing lesson. "The wholesale price is 100 gold coins a pound. When you get to the royal capital, you have to sell it for at least 200 gold coins. Just say this tea is grown next to a gold mine, picked by pure maidens using their lips, who sing a line of a hymn for every leaf they pick. Call it Royal Premium Box Tea. Only sell it to top-tier nobles. Tell them, if you don't drink this tea at a court ball, can you still be considered a decent person? Can you still mix in high society? Remember our Edenbrook business slogan. We don't ask for the best, we only ask for the most expensive." Godfrey covered his face in shame, while Richard felt a wave of dizziness, realizing he had already been arranged into a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered. After a few rounds of drinks, Richard also tasted our specialty Edenbrook moonshine. Hearing that this was also my industry, Richard was completely relieved. He made a spot decision to spend 2,000 gold coins on a batch of tea. When settling the bill, Tom ran over and flattered, "Lord Baron, he'll round off the fraction. It's a total of 500 gold coins." I scolded, "Are we eating gold? Why is it so expensive?" Tom aggrievedly pointed downstairs. "You shouted that you were paying the bill, and dozens of people came downstairs. They even ate the sweet melons we grew in the greenhouse. 10 gold coins each." I rolled my eyes and asked Brutus to pay. Brutus took a step forward, waving his wide cloak. Thump! A heavy leather bag smashed onto the table. "Count it, exactly 500 gold coins." Richard and Godfrey stared straight at that bag of gold coins. Godfrey stuttered, 500 gold coins, carried in a cloak? Brutus patted his chest. Our lord goes out carrying 1,000 gold coins in cash. Feels reassuring. Richard looked at Brutus' terrifying arm strength, his eyes full of shock. To be able to run around with dozens of pounds of pure gold hanging on his body, this was simply a monster in human skin. At noon the next day, Richard and Godfrey came to a secret room in the Lord's Hall to sign the contract with me. The room had no windows, lit by whale oil lamps all around. On the wall hung a motto written in Latin. Fierce-browed, I coolly defy 1,000 pointing fingers. Head bowed, like a willing ox I serve the children. Richard stared at the motto for a while and sighed. A good sentence. I smiled faintly and had Brutus place 20 tea bricks on the table. Inspect the goods. In the future, when you come to stock up, paste my Edenbrook emblem on your carriage, and I guarantee you unimpeded travel in the territory. I handed over 2 pieces of parchment, 1 commercial contract, and 1 non-disclosure agreement. Richard's eyelids twitched wildly as he looked at the clauses on the NDA. Violators of the oath will suffer sores on their mouths and tongues, weakness in their limbs, drown in the spit of Edenbrook citizens. Forget about that. What does this last clause, the right of final interpretation belongs to the Baron of Edenbrook, mean? I kept a straight face. It means exactly what it says. Richard wiped his sweat, gritted his teeth, and stamped his family wax seal. I picked up the contract, looked at it, and gestured for Richard to walk to a strange brass device in the exact center of the room. It was a large metal horn connected to a hand crank. Gentlemen, this is a custom here. Read the agreement into the horn to prove your sincerity. I counted to 3, and Richard held the agreement and started reading. Brutus rapidly turned the crank on the side. The fine needle at the tail of the horn continuously carved dense small dots in circles on a tinfoil cylinder. This was the alchemical product I tinkered with a phonograph. With this thing, if they dared to back out in the future, I would directly use the original audio recording to collect the debt. After the 2 finished reading, I unceremoniously offered tea to see the guests out. Richard and Godfrey were driven out of the hall. Just as they stood firm, a carriage stopped steadily in front of them. The coachman was full of smiles. By order of the Baron, I am to escort the 2 masters back to the royal capital. Godfrey thought I was quite considerate in handling things. Just as he stepped onto the carriage, the coachman reached out a hand. That will be 10 gold coins, please. Godfrey's face instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot. I crossed my legs, watching the carriage disappear outside the city gates. Of course, I didn't know that Sir Richard, this old chap, was almost disgusted to death on his way back to the royal capital. Not far out of Edenbrook, heavy rain fell from the sky. The unpaved, traditional imperial roads instantly turned into mud pits. Richard's carriage sank with every step. The coachman lost his grip, screamed, and half his body smashed into a mud puddle, clutching his head and cursing. Several serfs passing by gathered around, laughing loudly. Chief Chamberlain Godfrey had to get out and help him up. Richard sat in the carriage, looking at the miserable state outside, his heart overwhelmingly stifled. He directly threw down 20 silver coins, told the coachman to get lost, and walked on foot with Godfrey. Entering the outer city of the royal capital was even worse. Sewage flowed everywhere, and garbage and night soil were dumped directly onto the streets. A few ragged children were having a water fight in the dirty water. A pungent stench drifted in the air. Richard looked at the mess all over the ground, thought of the clean, smooth, stone-paved roads of Edenbrook, and his mindset completely collapsed. He originally thought that by repelling the barbarians and bringing peace to the empire, the commoners could live a good life. Now, looking at it as the dignified monarch of a country, he was actually inferior to a frontier baron. The perspective shifts to the royal palace. Richard changed out of his mud-covered dirty clothes and walked into the royal study with extremely low air pressure. Several ministers of the Privy Council were waiting to complain. Upon inquiry, Richard found out that during these past few days while Crown Prince Edward was overseeing the country, he hadn't attended a single Supreme Council meeting. Instead of studying with the scholars in the palace, he ran off to build a royal beast park, spending every day watching beasts fight in the gladiator arena. Richard's forehead veins bulged with anger, and he charged straight towards the beast park. At this time in the beast park, the slightly chubby Crown Prince Edward was slumped in a velvet chair, watching a tiger tear at an old horse. Looking thoroughly bored, he complained to his attendant Leo beside him. How boring! The world is at peace, and there are no wars to fight. If I had been born a few years earlier, the one leading troops to conquer the Ostrom Kingdom would definitely be me. My father just stole my credit in advance. Reaching an emotional point, he even squeezed out a tear. Alas, since my father was born, why was this prince born too? As soon as he finished speaking, Richard was already standing behind him, sneering and placing a hand on his shoulder. Jumping into the arena to fight a tiger. I think you'd be quite suitable. Edward shuddered in terror, stiffly turned his head, and squeezed out a smile uglier than crying. Effa father, you're back? Your son has caught a slight cold these past 2 days. Richard couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense. He directly hauled the crown prince to the royal garden, holding a thick, long oak stick and a leather whip picked out from the armory. Didn't you want to be a knight commander? Didn't you blame me for stealing your credit? Come, let us father and son practice today. Seeing he was about to be beaten, Edward quickly held his head and squatted defensively. Father, I'm still young. I'm still in my developmental stage. Richard sneered. I see you're dressed quite thickly. What kind of development is this? Men, strip him of his robe. Several royal guards rushed up. Stripping off the velvet outer robe revealed a thick cotton jacket inside. Stripping off the cotton jacket revealed a surcoat. After stripping off 4 layers, suddenly, with a clack, a shiny steel breastplate fell onto the grass. Richard's eyelids twitched. Take off his pants. The guards continued stripping his pants. After 2 layers, 2 iron buttock guards fell out. Further down, greaves, chainmail, and iron knee pads clattered all over the ground. Richard went mad with anger. You vile spawn, shirking work and playing tricks, uneducated and incompetent. I hired the best grand scholars in the entire empire to teach you, and this is what you learned. You are not even worth a single toe of that Baron of Edenbrook. Hang him up, thrash him ruthlessly for me. Edward was tied up like a meat dumpling and hung upside down on a stone pillar in the garden. This kid still had a stubborn mouth. I was born at the wrong time. I am falsely accused. Richard cracked the whip. Edward let out a pig-slaughtering scream. In reality, he still had a layer of sheet iron hidden in his leather crotch. It didn't hurt at all, entirely relying on his superb acting skills. After a dozen whips, Richard got tired. Seeing the crown prince screaming so miserably, his heart softened. Just as he was about to leave, the wind blew, and Edward spun around in midair, exposing the leather pants on his buttocks that had been split by the whip. Inside, the reflection of metal shone brightly. Richard's eyes turned totally red. Edward, good, very good. Strip him naked, stark naked. I will absolutely flog you to death today. At this time, Godfrey stumbled and crawled in. Your Majesty, Baron Silas' background has been investigated clearly. Richard then dropped the whip, coldly dropping a sentence. Keep him hanging on the pillar for me. He is not to be let down without my order. The perspective shifts back to Godfrey's report. Actually, it was investigating my background. Godfrey slapped my parchment file onto the table. Graduated first in his class from the Royal Academy at the age of 15. Granted a knighthood as an exception by the late king. Parents deceased. Had a fiery temper and contradicted the finance minister of the Privy Council. Directly banished to the godforsaken frontier of Edenbrook. The territorial reports submitted to the royal capital year after year read. Population of 2,000, successive years of famine, applying for exemption from the tithe. Godfrey gnashed his teeth in anger. This kid is audacious, building up a private army. Edenbrook's population has absolutely broken 10,000, and he hasn't paid a single copper coin in taxes to the royal family for 7 years. As a result, Richard was not only not angry, but actually laughed out loud. A top-tier academic genius at 15 turned a poor backwater into heaven on earth in 7 years. A rare talent. This is called knowing how to adapt. Keeping him to be the crown prince's mentor in the future, hell absolutely be a good hand. Then, Richard's eyes darted around, remembering the routine I taught him at the wine table. Godfrey, go procure a high-end shop in the inner city. Pack the tea we bought back into exquisite royal exclusive porcelain jars and sell it. 1 ounce per jar. Sell it for 50 gold coins for me. Godfrey was petrified on the spot. 800 gold coins a pound. That's even darker than Silas, that profiteer. The boss he served was the real robber. The next day at the morning court, Godfrey held a silver tray, deliberately swaying slowly in front of the officials of the Privy Council. On the tray was a pot of freshly brewed hot tea, overflowing with fragrance. Prime Minister Lord Ward smelled the scent and came over. Chief Steward Godfrey, what is this magical herbal soup? Godfrey raised his voice. This is called Tears of Venus. It's the leaves of a fairy tree from the mysterious east. His Majesty drinks it every day recently. It can prolong life, nourish the kidneys, and solidify vitality. Known as the secret of the lion. There was a burst of laughter in the crowd, but the eyes of several old nobles all lit up, secretly swallowing their saliva. Arriving at the main hall, Richard held his teacup, drinking unhurriedly. Finance Minister Giles came out crying poor, saying a massive flood broke out in the Lorraine River Valley, urgently needing 30,000 gold coins for disaster relief, and the state treasury couldn't produce the money. Unprecedentedly, Richard didn't scold anyone. With a grand wave of his hand, he directly pulled 10,000 gold coins from his royal private stash to plug the hole. The ministers all hailed His Majesty as benevolent and sagacious. Little did they know, Richard was waiting to use the tea to harvest them like leeks. After the court session, the Privy Council exploded. Prime Minister Ward sent his clerk Oliver to quickly go by the secret of the lion. An hour later, Oliver ran back, crying with a long face, saying, "My lord, not enough money. This tea is 50 gold coins an ounce, and it's strictly rationed, only selling 4 pounds a day. The stewards of the dukes and marquises are going crazy fighting at the door. The black market has already hyped it up to 60 gold coins." Ward gritted his teeth, scraped together 70 gold coins, and had Oliver go grab a jar back the next day. Several ministers of the Privy Council gathered around that small porcelain jar, as if looking at some rare treasure. Brewing the tea, Ward took a sip carefully. Actually, it was just ordinary clear water brewing fresh tea. But under the psychological effect, he felt this tea tea was simply the nectar of heaven. Minister Cedric closed his eyes, shaking his head, forcefully filling in the blanks with his imagination. Wonderful. This tea has the coolness of mint and licorice, absolutely capable of relieving heat. It also has the miraculous medicinal effects of the precious mandrake. Even more magically, there is actually a trace of the vitality of morning dew. 50 gold coins an ounce. Totally worth it. A group of old men felt an outpouring of poetic inspiration in the council chamber, fighting and scrambling to go stock up again. At this time, I was taking Brutus to curse out the workers in Edenbrook's tea workshop. I pointed at the haystack in the corner and swore loudly, "Which blind bastard put the tea leaves together with the dry haystack? If the flavors mix, he'll hang you all on the city walls to air dry." This is an export luxury item meant to earn gold coins from those fat sheep in the royal capital. The quality control must be stable. Keep a close eye on the ratio of medicinal herbs. Pick out the impurities cleanly. The bare-chested workers shouted in unison. "Understood, Lord Baron." Those sucker nobles in the royal capital deserved to properly drink my leftover scraps mixed with cheap herbs. Looking back at the royal capital. 3 days later, Godfrey rushed excitedly into the royal study. "Your Majesty, sold out." Black market merchants hyped the price sky high, and we made a wild profit of 10,500 gold coins in 3 days. Richard's eyes turned totally red. He stood up abruptly and paced around the room. Over 10,000 gold coins. Over 10,000. These son-of-a-bitch vampire nobles. During disaster relief, they wouldn't pluck a single copper coin, but they fight to buy tea worth dozens or hundreds of gold coins. Go. Prepare the carriages and horses. I'm going to Edenbrook to stock up again. After the excitement, Richard remembered the crown prince was still hanging on the pillar in the royal garden. Godfrey quickly ran to release him. After 3 days, Crown Prince Edward was hung until he was in a trance. Upon being let down, he immediately roared at Godfrey. 3 days. A full 3 days. "Do you know how I spent these 3 days? Godfrey coaxed and tricked Edward into the royal study. Richard pretentiously educated him a bit. Edward's eyes reddened, and he lowered his head to yield. As a result, Richard backhandedly dropped a sentence. "Go kneel in the corner of the wall. You are not allowed to get up without my word." Edward aggrievedly knelt in the corner, drawing circles. At this time, Royal Inspector Oswald came in. This unlucky guy was summoned overnight by Richard and ran here half dead. Richard went straight to the point. "How many times have you been to Edenbrook in recent years? How is the situation there?" Oswald knelt on the ground, his head kept tightly down. Replying to Your Majesty, "I have been there 3 times. The serfs number no more than 2,000. It is extremely poor, a place abandoned by the Richard slammed the table violently. "Bullshit. I just came back from Edenbrook." Oswald's whole body jolted violently, and his face instantly turned deathly pale. He never dreamed that the dignified emperor of the empire would actually run to that devil's den. Richard stared at him coldly. "Speak. What exactly did Silas give you to make you disregard even your life and dare to deceive your monarch?" Oswald completely broke down, kowtowing with loud thuds. He broke his forehead, and blood mixed with tears streamed down his face. "Your Majesty, I am wrong. I didn't want to deceive the monarch. It's that Baron Silas. He's simply not human." Hiding in the corner, Crown Prince Edward's ears immediately perked up. There's big gossip. Oswald wailed and poured out his grievances. "When I went to Edenbrook back then, I saw how filthy rich it was and was just about to report to the royal court. That demon Silas directly sent guards to tie me up and throw me into his dungeon, threatening me not to speak a word. They stripped me naked and tied me to a chair. He called some court-level portrait artist to paint a picture of me. Your Majesty, that painting was too realistic. They didn't even spare the moles on my body. They threatened me, saying if I dared to leak half a word, they would use a printing press to print tens of thousands of copies of that painting and distribute them all over the empire, ruining my reputation." Richard and Godfrey listened, dumbfounded. Is this something an imperial noble does? Even the bandits in the Black Forest aren't this vile. Oswald continued crying. "That's not all. They hoisted me naked in front of a giant brass horn and forced me to swear a toxic oath facing a cross, forced me to say that I had an unspeakable relationship with the sow in the manor." Edward couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing with a pff. Richard glared at him fiercely. Richard frowned. "So what if you said it? Words carry no proof. Who would believe it?" Oswald's tears and snot flowed horizontally. "That brass horn is an evil alchemical creation. It can record voices exactly as they are. Silas said, as long as I dared to leak the secret, he would play my voice swearing the oath in the squares of the royal capital for everyone to hear. Your Majesty, this is like yellow mud falling into one's pants. Even if it's not shit, it becomes shit." Hearing this sentence, Richard and Godfrey's sphincters tightened simultaneously. The two exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with unresolvable terror. Back when they signed the tea contract in the secret room, Silas had also forced them to face that big horn and read a toxic oath for breaching the contract. Doesn't that mean the evidence of the emperor's recording is also pinched in Silas' hands? Oswald sobbed uncontrollably. After swearing the oath, Silas also gifted me a large villa in Edenbrook and 500 gold coins. Your Majesty, he is an absolute devil. Richard trembled all over with anger and gritted his teeth to pronounce judgment. Oswald openly accepted bribes, stripped of official posts, stripped of knighthood titles. Get out of the royal capital. Oswald got his life back and rolled away with profound gratitude. Anyway, since his official post was gone, he could directly go retire in his paid-for villa in Edenbrook. A deathly silence fell in the royal study. Godfrey's eyes lost focus, his mouth continuously mumbling, "Gods above, Silas is truly not a human thing." As the chief steward in charge of court intelligence, when it came to being insidious, he actually couldn't outdo a frontier baron. Richard was so angry he kept smashing cups. Edward nodded his head like pounding garlic, his mind filled with nothing but rushing to meet this devil baron. Richard roared through gritted teeth, "Prepare the carriage to Edenbrook. To use such a miraculous alchemical creation for such vile deeds. I wish I could summon him here right now and personally whip him dozens of military strokes." Just a few days after Richard dropped those harsh words, God taught him a solid lesson. I only found out later that Richard rushed back to the royal capital overnight, and before his throne was even warm, a massive flood, the likes of which hadn't been seen in a century, broke out in the Lorraine River Valley. It collapsed 5 large stone dams in succession, and hundreds of thousands of commoners were displaced. The empire's treasury was so empty it could starve a mouse, and Richard was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. To raise money for disaster relief, he set his sights firmly on my high-priced tiers of Venus tea. In the dead of night, he dragged up Crown Prince Edward and Chief Steward Godfrey, spurred their horses, and charged back to my Edenbrook again. At noon the next day, I was still hugging my goose-down quilt sleeping soundly when guard Captain Brutus howled to wake me. "My lord, those 2 fat sheep buying porcelain from last time are here again, right at the Travelers' Rest Inn. Fat sheep at the door." I quickly put on my everyday noble attire, took a carriage, and went straight to the inn. As soon as I got out of the carriage, a foul stench hit my face. The fat boss of the inn was holding a broken fan, fanning wildly at the door. I went up and kicked him right in the rear. "You dog, did the cesspool explode? What's going on?" The boss hugged my thigh and wailed, "My lord, I'm innocent. Some drunk bastard drained the water in the water tower. The flush toilets have no water to flush." While I was cursing, Richard, leading his son and Godfrey, walked downstairs pinching their noses. I immediately put on a smiling face and went to meet them. "Sir Richard, the tea business in the royal capital is doing well, right?" Godfrey curled his lip, looking extremely displeased. I couldn't be bothered with him and took them directly to the Silver Moon Grand Tavern to eat. As soon as we sat down, Richard got straight to the point. "Baron Silas, the tea from last time sold for over 13,000 gold coins. This time, I want 200 pounds. His eye was secretly shocked. This old boy has a really dark heart. He turned around and sold cheap leaves that cost a few coppers for astronomical prices. He was absolutely a talent. I slapped my thigh. "No problem, as much as you want." The waiter served the heavy dishes. I pointed at a large basin of meat and showed off. "Taste it. My Edenbrook signature dish, rustic peasant pork stew." Richard's son Edward frowned tightly, saying with disgust, "Pork stinks and is gamey. Only untouchables and serfs eat it. You serve us this?" "Oh, this little brat is quite arrogant." I used a silver fork to spear a piece of oily pork belly, glanced sideways at Chief Steward Godfrey across from me, and slowly popularized some science. "This shows what you don't understand. These pigs are castrated barrows. Boars have a fierce temperament. Cut off their life roots when they're young, and they grow up docile, gain meat quickly, and most importantly, there's no gamey smell at all." Speaking of this, I deliberately raised my voice. Actually, it's the same for humans. Look at those castrated court eunuchs or choir boys in the Eastern empires. Aren't they all fair, chubby, and peaceful in temperament? However, pigs don't hold grudges after being cut, but whether a human will hold a grudge after being cut is hard to say. This castration is absolutely a profound field of study. As soon as I finished speaking, Godfrey's face instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot, his teeth grinding audibly. Edward held back his laughter so hard his whole body trembled, until Richard kicked him viciously under the table. Richard quickly forked a piece of meat into his mouth, his eyes instantly lighting up. Fat but not greasy. Peerless delicacy. After eating and drinking our fill, Richard suddenly had Godfrey pull out a huge imperial military parchment map and spread it on the table. My heart skipped a beat. This Sir Richard was well connected enough to even get his hands on military maps. Richard pointed at the Lorraine River Valley on the map, looking distressed. "There's a great flood in the south and my merchant caravans can't get through." The governor of Lorraine opened his mouth to demand 20,000 gold coins for disaster relief, and the royal court simply cannot produce the money. If the baron has a good strategy to control the waters, he will surely soar to great heights. I followed his finger and locked my eyes on a gorge on the map. This place is called Silver Gorge, flanked by mountains on both sides. If we could call down the wild thunder of God to shatter these mountains and block the river channel, wouldn't the flood disaster be solved? Smack! Richard's silver fork dropped onto the table. Godfrey stared with wide eyes as if looking at a monster. Edward jumped up even more excitedly. Father, I told you we should find a court wizard to summon heavenly thunder. Lord Silas and I absolutely share the same vision of heroes. I suddenly snapped back to reality. Crap, I let it slip. Back then, to guard against bandits, I secretly manufactured tons of alchemical black powder in the territory. It had been sitting in the warehouse collecting dust. Bringing it out to blow up the mountain would definitely work, but once this thing was revealed, my days as a local emperor would be over. I quickly laughed it off, just joking, where would there be heavenly thunder? Drink, drink. Richard stared dead at me, his eyes full of probing. After the meal, I took them strolling around the territory. Richard asked me, imperial nobles all look down on merchants. Why is the baron so polite to us? I pointed to an alehouse on the street and gave him an economics lesson. Wheat sitting in the fields is just rough grain worth a few coppers. A merchant transports it to a brewery and brews it into premium whiskey, and its value multiplies 100-fold. This is called resource allocation. People everywhere despise merchants, but my Edenbrook specifically values commerce, which is why we have today's prosperity. Richard looked thoughtful. Nearby, Edward strolled over to a bookstall, picked up a book, and his eyes almost popped out. Baron Silas Battles the Demon King Ball. The stall owner went up to pitch it, from out of town, right? This book tells the story of the Abyss Demon King Ball invading the Empire, and Lord Baron gathering the 7 rings of creation to assist His Majesty the Emperor in smashing the demon army. 50 copper coins a copy. My old face flushed red. Which bastard printed the bullshit I usually bragged about into a book? Edward flipped through 2 pages, his face full of disdain. It's entirely written in vulgar common tongue. It simply insults the gentility of nobles and wastes this fine parchment. Why not write it in classical language? I walked over, picked up the book, and shook it. What's wrong with the common tongue? If the common people can read it, it's a good book. You think more words waste paper? I'm telling you, translating one sentence of classical language into common tongue can triple the word count. With more words, the scale of the printing workshop must expand. Papermakers, ink makers, typesetters, they all need to hire people. One book feeds hundreds of craftsmen in the entire territory. Even the peddlers selling books on the streets can eat 2 more bites of meat. You call this vulgar, I call this stimulating domestic demand in the territory. Edward opened his mouth, unable to squeeze out a single word for a long time. The way Richard looked at me completely changed. Night fell, and Richard sneaked into the backyard of the Lord's Hall alone. Maid Tessa led him to the garden. I was sitting by the stone table, swirling a glass of red wine, maximizing the pretentious atmosphere. Richard sat opposite me and got straight to the point. Silas, honest men don't speak in riddles. Do you really have a way to solve the flood in the Lorraine River Valley? I set down the wine glass and sighed. You're ruthless. I hold a great killing weapon called the Wrath of God. Can cleave mountains and crack stones to block the river channel. Richard trembled with excitement. I immediately threw cold water on him. This item is extremely dangerous. I will send 20 Death Squad miners to transport it to the Lorraine River Valley. Flat price, 50,000 gold coins. Richard froze. I don't have that much cash. No money? The Edenbrook Commercial Bank offers low-interest loans. Richard gritted his teeth and agreed. I leaned close to him, my face solemn as I instructed. Richard, blowing up the mountain is only the first step. After a great disaster, a great plague is sure to follow. Corpses soaking and swelling in the water are a breeding ground for plagues. Listen well, as soon as the floodwaters recede, the first thing is to burn the corpses on the spot. To hell with the church's rules of burial in the ground. Burn them all to ashes. Second, designate high ground to resettle the living, and ruthlessly scatter quicklime in low-lying areas to disinfect. Third, anyone with a cough or fever must be quarantined immediately along with their bed. Everyone must cover their mouths and noses with boiled fine linen cloth. Anyone who dares to spit anywhere, break their legs on the spot. Richard was dumbfounded. He looked at me, a surge of indescribable fanaticism and emotion welling up in his eyes. He grabbed another cup of water on the table, tilted his head back, and drank it all in one gulp. The Baron is a great talent. Richard toasts you. I froze for 2 seconds. Richard, why are you drinking my mouthwash? Richard's face turned livid, and he fled in panic. Richard signed the loan contract and took the 200 pounds of tea, rushing back to the royal capital overnight. Little did I know how much commotion this father-son duo would cause after going back. On the way back, Edward relentlessly clamored for me to be his master. Richard was worn down to the point of having no temper left and promised that as long as he memorized 10 classical scriptures, he would transfer me into the palace to reside in the Royal Academy. As soon as Richard returned to the palace, before he even changed his clothes, the old men of the Privy Council blocked his door. The finance minister knelt on the ground crying, "Poor, Your Majesty, the Lorraine flood is extremely urgent. I beg Your Majesty to allocate 20,000 gold coins for disaster relief." Richard sneered. Having witnessed the resource allocation I taught, he was now completely enlightened. The state treasury has no money. My private vault has no money either. An imperial disaster is exactly when you lords should be loyal and serve the country. Tomorrow at the morning court, all officials will make donations. No one even think about running away. The ministers were all dumbfounded. Meanwhile, taking advantage of no one watching him, Crown Prince Edward secretly changed into rough cloth clothes and and ran to the lower city slums of the royal capital. This trip directly shattered his worldview. Compared to Edenbrook's blue bricks and large tiles, clean and tidy, the capital's outer city was simply a giant stinking ditch. Mud was everywhere, black and yellow intertwined, and a foul stench pierced the sky. Edward, wearing expensive leather boots, stepped into a mud puddle and nearly slipped. While he was carefully dodging puddles, the wooden door of a dilapidated house nearby was suddenly pushed open. A fierce woman holding a wooden basin splashed a basin of slop mixed with rotten fish intestines and bloody water directly onto his feet. The fishy stench rushed straight to his brain, and Edward bent over and began to dry heave. Godfrey, who was hiding in the shadows, grew anxious and jumped out to curse loudly. The woman was so frightened she knelt in the mud, frantically kissing the dirt. "Mercy, my lord! Mercy, my lord!" Edward covered his nose and, as if guided by ghosts and gods, asked a question. "What is this you're throwing out in the basin?" "It's leftover fish bones." Edward pushed the woman aside and went straight into that dark, damp, dilapidated wooden house. The room was filled with a musty smell. Lying on the bedboards was a man with a broken leg, his face sallow and emaciated, looking like a withered ghost. On the stove, a chipped iron pot was heating up. Edward pointed at the cloudy yellow mush in the pot and asked, "This is what you eat?" The woman picked up a cracked wooden bowl. Inside was a lump of mud mixed with chaff, yellow millet, and unknown wild weeds. It faintly emitted a strong, sour, spoiled smell. "This is our whole family's daily ration." Edward stared dead at that thing, which was inferior even to pig slop. "Is this edible?" Godfrey was so terrified he lunged to snatch the bowl. "Your Highness, you must not touch this. Eating this will ruin your stomach and cost you your life." Edward kicked Godfrey away and snatched the broken bowl. He took a deep breath, gouged out a small piece of the spoiled mush with his finger, closed his eyes, and stuffed it into his mouth. Extreme sourness, bitterness, and staleness instantly exploded on his taste buds. That rough sensation scraping his throat shot straight to his stomach. Blur. Edward threw up even his bitter bile, tears and snot covering his face. The wooden bowl in his hand smashed to pieces. Seeing this, the man with the broken leg was so scared he scrambled off the bed, lay on the floor, grabbed the lump of vomited mush, and stuffed it straight into his mouth, crying as he ate, "Young master, it's edible. It's really edible. Don't waste it." Edward froze in place. He looked at the miserable state of the man's face covered in mud and mush. His complexion went from pale to red, and his eyes completely watered. He suddenly felt extremely ashamed. In the royal palace, he had fine clothes and rich food every day, yet disdained reading classical literature as boring. In Edenbrook, he disdained the alternating fat and lean pork as having a gamey smell. Yet right at the feet of the royal capital, the subjects of the empire were lying in the mud eating spoiled wild grass. Readied, he squeezed out a sentence through his teeth. "Godfrey, give them 10 gold coins. Let's go." Walking out of the lower city, Edward looked at the dilapidated streets and softly asked Godfrey, "Before you entered the palace, was this what you ate?" Godfrey smiled bitterly. "Your Highness, being able to eat this kind of mush every day was already considered a good life. Before, going hungry for 3 days at a time was common. It's only been peaceful for 2 years." Edward suddenly understood. No wonder so many men desperately castrated themselves to enter the Eastern Court to serve. He clenched his fists tightly, his mind filled with the prosperous, affluent Edenbrook where everyone could eat meat that I had described to him, his eyes frighteningly resolute. "Go back. I want to memorize books. I must have Silas as my mentor." Edward, with red eyes, swore a toxic oath through gritted teeth. Who could have thought that just because of one trip to Edenbrook, this notorious, uneducated demon king of the empire, who wasn't even willing to touch a parchment scroll, would unprecedentedly pick up classical scriptures and burn the midnight oil? Meanwhile, above the royal court, the storm had brewed to its peak. The Minister of Military Affairs, his face livid, strode forward. "Your Majesty, the flood in the Lorraine River Valley is intensifying. Rebellious forces have bred among the people, calling themselves the Abyssal Sea God cult. These people are remnants of the enemy nation, led by their high priestess, rallying thousands of disaster victims to rebel. The garrison in Lorraine is short of manpower. I request the royal court to immediately dispatch an army of 10,000 and allocate silver for disaster relief." The ministers immediately exploded. They wanted money. They wanted men. Richard sat steadily on the throne, his face sinking like water. The state treasury had long been empty enough to run horses in. Where would gold coins come from? He swept a cold glance and simply asked all officials to donate. And the result? Prime Minister Ward took the lead and donated 500 gold coins, and those big-eared, fat-head nobles below, acting as if their flesh was being cut, dug out a few dozen or a dozen coins each. The civil and military officials of the whole court, dozens of grand nobles, actually scraped together less than 4,000 gold coins. Richard's eyelids twitched with anger. "I can rake in over 10,000 by selling tea for 2 days, and you bunch of guys whose mouths are full of knightly spirit and lordly responsibility are here begging like paupers. Dispatch 15,000 troops and take 2,000 gold coins to the Lorraine River Valley." Richard suppressed his anger and dropped a harsh remark. "For the rest, well, take it one step at a time." The officials stamped their feet in anxiety. What kind of disaster relief is 2,000 gold coins? But Richard ignored them entirely. He was actually panicking inside, holding on purely by a breath of stubbornness. He had staked everything on the batch of miners I dispatched. At this time, in the Lorraine River Valley, Silver Gorge, the rain poured down, and the wild wind howled. Duncan, the mine foreman under my command, was leading 20 brothers, carrying black powder wrapped in oiled paper, climbing with difficulty on the muddy mountain road. Behind them followed over 200 burly men in plain clothes. These were the Royal Knights sent by Richard as escorts. Royal Knight Commander Valentine originally totally looked down on my group of mudlegs, but after competing on the boat these past few days, he was astounded. My brothers, who dug mines and ate meat every day in Edenbrook, were all pure muscle when they took off their clothes, and in a test of strength, they actually matched the Royal Inner Guard. Now climbing the mountain carrying heavy loads in the rainstorm, the miners walked as if on flat ground, while the knights were tired and panting heavily. Duncan, the rain is too heavy. Will this work? Valentine wiped the rain from his face and roared loudly. Duncan wiped away the rain, his eyes shining with excitement. It will work, Lord Baron said. After it's done, everyone gets a reward of 1,000 gold coins. Even if it rains knives, I'm going to blow this mountain flat today. Hearing about 1,000 gold coins, the 20 miners howled like they'd been injected with chicken blood. Rushing halfway up the mountain, Duncan found an excellent mountain crevice. Right here, drop the charges. Hundreds of pounds of explosives were stuffed along the crevice, and the fuse was led all the way to the foot of the mountain. Valentine looked at this thin fuse, his face completely bewildered. Duncan, just with this thing? How will the mountain explode? Duncan grinned and brought a match to the fuse. With a sizzle, the flame drilled into the oiled paper casing. Get down. Cover your fucking ears. Duncan roared hoarsely. The next second, the earth trembled violently. Boom! Heavenly thunder burst forth. A 10th Santan hurricane. Countless crushed stones were ripped apart by the gunpowder and shot into the sky. Under this apocalyptic power, the giant mountain peak shook violently, let out a toothaking roar, and collapsed crashing down towards the rolling river. Rumble. Giant rocks rolled down, smashing into the river valley, stirring up monstrous waves 100 feet high, forcefully cutting the raging floodwaters into two segments. Valentine and the group of royal knights lay dead flat in the mud, their livers and gallbladders splitting, their eyes bloodshot, trembling uncontrollably. Some even buried their heads in the muddy water, shivering in fear. This was not a mortal's method at all. This was God unleashing his wrath. Duncan patted the mud off his body, looked at the terrified Valentine, and chuckled, "Softies, brothers, let's go to the next mountain peak. After we blow it up, we return to Edenbrook to claim our rewards and take a bath." Under the knights' gazes of awe as if looking at gods, Duncan repeated the process, completely collapsing the southern mountain peak as well. The floodwaters were thoroughly blocked and diverted to flow eastward. 10 days later, at the royal capital's court, Richard was almost unable to hold on. Urgent reports came from the Lorraine River Valley every day, and the southern noble faction argued in the council chamber daily. Today, Charles, a member of the lower house, completely flipped out. His hometown was in the south, and his family sent letters pressing him every day. He directly knelt on one knee, pointed at Richard's throne, and shouted, "Your Majesty, the commoners in the Lorraine River Valley are in deep waters and scorching fire, yet the royal court does nothing. What exactly is your Majesty thinking? How will future history books evaluate your actions?" A group of pure stream censoring officials knelt down with a clatter. "We beseech your Majesty to reconsider." Richard's hair stood on end with rage, and he stood up abruptly. "Charles, you dare lecture me? Good. You love the people so much. They'll confiscate your property right now and send you to the front lines for disaster relief." Charles' face turned white, cold sweat poured down, and he kept his head down tightly, not daring to make a sound. Prime Minister Ward quickly stepped out to smooth things over. "Your Majesty, calm your anger. What exactly are you waiting for?" Richard took a deep breath, just about to open his mouth to say he might have trusted the wrong person. Right at this moment, a court attendant stumbled and rushed into the main hall, his voice breaking from shouting, "Urgent report, urgent dispatch from the Lorraine frontline." The entire hall instantly went dead silent. Richard grabbed the wax-sealed message tube, unrolled the parchment, and upon seeing it, his eyes instantly widened, his pupils shrinking violently. A full dozen seconds passed. "Ha ha 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 ha." Richard suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. He smashed the letter in front of Charles, roaring with high spirits. Read it loudly for me." Trembling, Charles picked up the letter. Just looking at it, cold sweat smashed down like a waterfall. The north and south peaks of Silver Gorge, mountain bodies collapsed. River channel is blocked. The floodwaters head east and return no more. The crisis of the Lorraine River Valley is resolved. As soon as his voice fell, the civil and military officials were struck like lightning. The mountains collapsed. Did God manifest himself? Before they could recover, another attendant rushed in. "Urgent report. Great victory in quelling the rebellion in Lorraine. After the flood was cut off, the great army charged into the river valley. The abyssal sea god cult fled at the mere sight of us, collapsing without a fight. The heretic high priestess is missing. A double blessing." The royal court completely boiled over. Richard looked down from above at the horrified faces below, feeling a thrill to the extreme. The scolding he endured for half a month was worth it. "How did your Majesty know the flood would be resolved?" Ward asked, trembling. The corners of Richard's mouth curled into a mysterious smile, finally dropping the bombshell. "My lords, have you ever heard of Edenbrook? The one who resolved the flood is precisely an extraordinary man named Silas." The ministers looked at each other in dismay. "Silas? Who is that?" Richard directly ordered. "Baron Silas offered a divine artifact to resolve the Empire's crisis. His merit is paramount. He is hereby conferred the title of Viscount of Edenbrook, and his territory is expanded. He will enter the Royal Academy, serve as Chief Grand Tutor, exclusively responsible for teaching the Crown Prince." As soon as these words came out, the officials were appalled. Conferring a viscounty was one thing, but to be the Crown Prince's mentor? He's only in his early 20s. Duke Arthur, Minister of the Privy Council, stamped his feet anxiously. "Unacceptable. This person is young. How can he teach the Crown Prince? Why can't he?" Crown Prince Edward, who had been hiding on the side, suddenly bounded out, stiffening his neck and shouting, "I stayed in Edenbrook for one day and benefited immensely. I have now memorized even the driest Latin sacred texts. If you don't believe me, ask my old scholar." The old scholar responsible for teaching the Crown Prince flushed red and helplessly stepped out, replying to Your Majesty, "His Highness has indeed been frantically memorizing books recently." Complete silence. That demon king who mixed with trouble actually started memorizing books? Duke Arthur obediently shut his mouth. To be able to make the Crown Prince turn over a new leaf, conferring the title of Chief Grand Tutor was nothing. At this time, inside the Lord's Castle of Edenbrook, I was lying comfortably in a velvet high-back chair, flipping through the third edition of Baron Silas Battles, the Demon King Ball that I just bought from the bookstall. This book was written exactly to my taste, portraying this young master as heroic and martial, subduing various elves and princesses along the way. I was just pondering whether to lock the author in the dungeon and force him to update 10,000 words a day, when Brutus rushed in, burning with urgency. "My lord, the miners who went to blow up the mountain are back." I scrambled up. "Is everyone okay? Did it go smoothly?" "All in one piece, but they picked up a half-dead mud monkey on the road and threw it in the clinic." I cursed in annoyance and took maid Tessa straight to the town's clinic. Arriving at the clinic, after having someone fetch water to wash it clean, I was stunned. Lying on the bed was no mud monkey, but clearly a peerless beauty capable of toppling cities and nations. Skin as white as snow, features like a painting, and that cold, noble aura simply outclassed all the noble socialites I had ever seen. This was absolutely no ordinary commoner. Just as I was wondering about this woman's origins, a pig-slaughtering scream suddenly came from downstairs. My lord, the edict has arrived. The king's edict from the royal capital." My brain buzzed. A king's edict? It reached Edenbrook? That old boy Richard sold me out. I rushed downstairs. Outside the clinic, I saw a dense crowd of Edenbrook commoners surrounding the place. A royal herald dressed in gorgeous silk clothes stood trembling in the middle, his calves cramping, because surrounding him, over 100 farmers and citizens were holding pitchforks, sickles, and logging axes, staring at him with murderous intent. "Baron Silas, receive the decree." The herald forced himself to unroll the parchment and finish reading. "Promoted to Viscount of Edenbrook. Immediately enter the royal capital to report on duties." As soon as his voice fell, the crowd completely exploded. "They want to take the Lord Baron away. We can't let the Lord go. We cannot leave the Lord. Kill this sissy from the royal capital. As long as we bury him in the Black Forest, well, pretend this edict never existed." Dozens of gleaming pitchforks pressed directly against the herald's neck. The herald collapsed into the mud with a thud, so terrified he wet his expensive riding breeches, crying and pleading to me for help. "Lord Silas, save me." I cursed angrily. "All of you shut up. I'm going to the royal capital to be a high official, not going to the guillotine. Put your weapons down." Only then did the unruly mob aggrievely put away their tools, wiping their tears one by one, howling as if their own father had died. I quickly helped the herald up, simultaneously giving Brutus frantic hints to stuff money to silence him. Brutus, this blockhead, pulled out a large bag weighing a full 20 pounds of silver coins from his cloak and forcefully stuffed it into the herald's cloak hood with a clang. The terrifying weight directly dragged the herald down to fall flat on his face. My face turned black. I kicked Brutus away, bent down, and personally reached into the herald's clothes to dig. "Lord Herald has been frightened. Please accept this little token. Have a cup of ale on the road." While speaking with righteous awe, I conveniently dug back that heavy bag of silver coins, and at the end, I even stealthily swiped the 2 silver coins and 5 coppers originally in his waist pouch. Hearing the crisp sound of the coppers being dug out of his pouch, the herald opened his mouth wide, tears streaming down uncontrollably. "Lord Silas, you and I have no enmity. What exactly are you doing? Go, be careful on the road, don't run into bandits." I stuffed those 2 silver coins into my breast pocket and waved my hand casually. The herald felt as if granted a general amnesty, scrambled onto his horse, and fled Edenbrook like a madman. After sending off the herald, just as I was preparing to return to the Lord's Hall to arrange matters for entering the capital, a coquettish voice suddenly came from behind me. "Lord Baron, please wait." Bianca, the peerless beauty who was picked up, was leaning against the doorframe at some point, looking pitiful. This humble girl is Bianca. My family died in the flood, and I have nowhere to go. I am willing to follow the Lord and serve as a slave and maid to repay the life-saving grace. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of manipulative green tea hasn't I seen in my past life? This woman is full of suspicious points. She wants to be my maid right after waking up? Does she covet my body or my wealth? Oh, noted. I kept a cold face. Since you are cured, go home yourself. Tessa, give her 2 silver coins for travel expenses. Let's go. After saying that, I strode away without looking back. Bianca froze in place, her eyes full of disbelief. A peerless beauty of her caliber taking the initiative to offer herself, and she was ruthlessly rejected? Cough, cough. She violently coughed up a mouthful of blood and gritted her silver teeth. Looking at my retreating back, she hardened her heart, dragging her sick body to desperately chase after me. Lord Silas. I looked back. This chick still dared to chase? Run. Shake her off. I took Brutus and Tessa and bolted. Bianca chased until she was out of breath, directly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, and limply fainted on the street. Half an hour later, in the inner courtyard of the Lord's Hall, Bianca lay on a stretcher, clutching my pant leg in a death grip, closing her eyes and crying mournfully. Father, mother, Bianca misses you so much. Tessa's eyes grew red watching this. My lord, she's too pitiful. Why not let her stay? I sneered. Faking it? Keep faking. I crouched down and tried hard to pry her hands open. Good heavens, this little lattice strength was not small. I couldn't pry them open to save my life. Brutus leaned in. My lord, let me. I'll crush her bones. Roll aside. I pushed Brutus away. To deal with this kind of scheming woman, one must use magic to defeat magic. I tightly covered Bianca's mouth with my left hand, extended 2 fingers of my right hand, and with unparalleled precision, jammed them into her 2 nostrils. 1 second, 2 seconds, cough, cough, cough. Bianca violently opened her eyes wide, her face flushed red. She struggled intensely, let go of her hand, and gasped heavily for air. Her eye sockets were full of humiliating tears. Being driven away, ignored, and now having her nostrils penetrated. Had she, a dignified, peerless beauty, ever suffered such bizarre and extraordinary humiliation? Awake, I clapped my hands, looking at her with a smile. If you can walk, hurry up and get out. Bianca bit the tip of her tongue, forcefully suppressing the urge to hack me into 1,000 pieces, abruptly knelt on the ground and kowtowed loudly. I beg the Lord to take me in. This commoner is willing to work like a horse and ox. Seeing her forehead bleed from kowtowing, I rubbed my chin. Since she wants to stay so badly, I'll keep her and play slowly. All right, I sighed. From now on, you are Tessa's junior maid. Remember, the maid of a maid. A salary of 3 silver coins a month. Just as Bianca was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I changed my tone. However, the medical fees for your treatment must be deducted from your salary. Sign a 1-year contract. You are not allowed to leave within a year. The maid of a maid, and deducting medical fees. Bianca only felt a wave of sweet metallic taste in her throat. Her vision went black, and she completely fainted from anger. TSK, crying tears of joy. I spread my hands innocently. Having settled this troublemaker, I immediately convened the sheriff and the tax officer to arrange the mess after my departure. After I leave, the territory's laws follow one principle. Anything not prohibited by law is permitted, but anyone who dares to bully men and women or disrupt commerce, break their legs and drive them out of Edenbrook. As soon as my voice fell, Sheriff Cole stepped out trembling, cold sweat pouring down. My lord, a few days ago, a dozen royal knights from the royal capital came to our territory to snoop around. They were caught by us as enemy spies. My vision went black, and I almost fell off the Lord's throne. Royal knights from the capital? You arrested the king's close guards. Did you use illegal torture? No illegal torture. Cole wiped his sweat. It's just, we found the most terrible bard in the tavern and had him sing brainwashing divine tunes to them for 5 consecutive days. They suffered mental breakdowns and confessed everything. My brain buzzed. You locked up the Emperor's secret agents and fucking brainwashed them with demonic music for 5 days. Release them immediately. Provide them with the best food and drink. Stuff 20 gold coins into each person's hands and send them off. I slammed the table, jumping with anxiety. Tessa, take the imperial bearer drafts worth 120,000 gold coins. Bring Brutus. We are setting off for the royal capital right now. I couldn't stay in Edenbrook for a single second longer. If I stayed, who knows what kind of disaster these unruly subjects would stir up that would send me to the guillotine. I took the massive sum of money, got into the carriage, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust. Ahead of me awaited the treacherous circle of power in the royal capital, as well as that strange crown prince who was clamoring to be fed and waiting for me to teach him how to be a man. In the carriage, I felt the thick stack of bank drafts in my breast pocket. Just as I was about to fantasize about the extravagant life in the royal capital, the carriage suddenly braked hard, and Brutus' deafening voice roared outside. My lord, up ahead is a group of men in black holding weapons, blocking our path. Brutus' broken gong voice gave me a jolt. I threw open the carriage curtain. Outside, it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and the cold wind blew straight down my neck. I looked looked closely what men in black assassins? It was entirely a group of mudlegs wearing rough cloth clothes. The crowd was dense, holding torches and oil lamps. Under the firelight, they were all familiar faces. Tavern owner Tom, guard Rufus, and citizens of Edenbrook who had woken up early and rushed from all over the city. What they held in their hands weren't crusader swords, but pitchforks, iron hammers, and short wooden clubs. Tom shivered from the cold, came up, and pulled out a leather water skin from his chest. Inside was warm mead, with tears in his eyes. "My lord, it's cold. Have a sip on the road to warm your body." With him taking the lead, the commoners all went crazy, throwing freshly laid eggs, fresh cheese, and smoked meat onto the carriage as if their lives depended on it. My nose suddenly stung, and my tears almost burst out. These unruly subjects, usually so stingy, were actually being generous at a time like this. I quickly used my velvet sleeve to wipe my face, raised my voice, and scolded, "All of you roll back," forcing me out of the carriage on a cold day. The wind is blowing my eyes so hard they hurt. Not only did the commoners not leave, they cried even harder. They knew in their hearts that with me going to the royal capital to be the crown prince's mentor, I would probably find it very hard to return to this remote barony in this lifetime. I didn't dare look anymore, afraid I would cry out loud on the spot and lose my noble face. I turned and ducked back into the carriage, covering my face with a parchment book. Let's go to the royal capital. Entering the inner city of the royal capital, my first order of business was to buy a house. The merchant guild found me a ready-made large mansion with a garden and a fountain. The owner's name was Garrick. This old boy saw that I was a newly promoted viscount from the countryside, and he opened his lion's mouth, asking for 2,000 gold coins right off the bat. I slouched arrogantly in the velvet high-backed chair, chewing raisins and sneering. "Garrick, 1,000 gold coins, not a penny more." Garrick stiffened his neck. "Lord Silas, my mansion is worth at least 1,800 gold coins, no matter how cheap. If you can't afford it, find someone else." I didn't waste words. Beside me, the bare-chested Brutus directly struck a bodybuilding pose. His muscles were smeared with oil, veins bulging, looking like a man-eating behemoth. Garrick was so scared his calves cramped. I gave maid Bianca a look. Bianca reluctantly pulled out the king's edict stamped with the royal wax seal and held it high above her head. I slowly tapped the table. "Garrick, I heard you forcibly took a concubine a while ago, driving a 14 or 15-year-old girl to jump into the moat and commit suicide. I'm having an audience with His Majesty tomorrow, and I was just worrying about having no topics to chat with the Emperor about. Do you still want to run the business of those casinos of yours? 900 gold coins, is that excessive?" Seeing the king's edict, Garrick dropped to one knee with a thud, sweating profusely. "Lord Viscount, that commoner was mortgaged to me for owing a high-interest loan. Her jumping into the river has nothing to do with me. Besides, behind me is the son of the finance minister, Viscount Julian. Are you really going to offend the finance minister over a commoner? It doesn't matter if I sell this mansion or not. Don't force me." Using the finance minister to pressure me, I stood up, walked up to him, and patted his fat face. "Garrick, wouldn't it be nice to sell it for 1,000 gold coins? Why make things so tense?" Garrick thought I chickened out and was just about to smile. I leaned in close to his ear and spoke sinisterly. "Unfortunately, this baron is a scumbag, and I absolutely do not allow anyone to be scummier than me in front of my face. Guess whether the finance minister will offend me over a dog? 700 gold coins." Garrick completely broke down. Encountering a lunatic like me who didn't care about his life, how could he dare talk back anymore? Gritting his teeth, he admitted defeat. "Fine, 700 gold coins." I glanced at the water well in the yard and waved my hand in disgust. "Someone died in the yard? It's too unlucky. 600 gold coins." Okay. Garrick's nails dug into his own flesh. I smiled radiantly. "Straightforward. Brutus, do a trick for him." Brutus opened his large mouth, pulled out a large solid gold bar weighing a few pounds from his bundle, and right in front of Garrick, clapped his hands together violently. Crunch! The thick, pure gold bar was forcefully flattened into a gold pancake by his bare hands. I threw this gold pancake bearing a clear palm print to Garrick. "Look, this gold bears a palm print. It has extremely high artistic value. Plus my chief knight's performance fee. They'll count it as 500 gold coins for you. Deal." Garrick's eyes were full of bloodshot veins. Holding that deformed gold pancake, he stumbled and crawled to get the property deed, fleeing out the main gate without even packing his valuables. I touched the deed and blossomed with joy. New home, sorted. Early the next morning, before the sky was bright, Bianca punched me in the face to wake me up. This woman had no idea how to serve someone getting dressed. She clumsily put the court attire on me, tying the belt in a mess. When I took the carriage to the plaza of the royal palace, there wasn't a ghost in sight at the gate. I was late. The fucking Minister of Foreign Affairs didn't even arrange an attendant to receive me. Holding up my silk pants that kept slipping down, I ran like a headless fly through the corridors of the royal palace. I finally found the grand throne room, but just as I crossed the threshold, I stepped on my wide pant leg. Swish! In front of the entire civil and military court of the Privy Council, I literally slide-kneeled on the marble floor all the way to the center of the hall. Total silence. All the grand nobles' gazes pierced into me like knives. Sweating profusely, I kept my head down and quickly tried to salvage the situation, shouting at the top of my lungs, "Subject Silas Kowtows to your majesty. Your majesty's divine might covers the world. Your civil and military achievements shine with divine grace. Wherever your sword points, the four seas submit. This subject finally gazes upon the heavenly countenance, awed by your majesty's kingly aura. unable to contain the joy in my heart. Hence this breach of etiquette in the hall. I beg your majesty to punish me. This bootlicking echoed loudly. The faces of the ministers in the hall turned green. Prime Minister Ward rolled his eyes. When had these courtiers, who spoke of knightly character and noble honor every day, ever heard such shameless remarks? Raise your head. A furious shout came from the throne. Trembling, I raised my head and caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. Fuck me. The one sitting on the throne was actually Sir Richard, the great merchant who went to my Edenbrook to buy tea. The old steward standing next to him was his attendant Godfrey. The kid covering his mouth and snickering next to him was the Crown Prince Edward, to whom I had explained the castration of pigs. My brain buzzed. The enemies I had been looking for all day were actually the current emperor and crown prince. Richard suppressed a laugh and put on a stern face. Silas, you are improperly dressed, and you came to court wearing a green robe that violates regulations. What about the Viscount's court attire issued to you by the royal tailor? Could I say the herald didn't give it to me? My mind spun rapidly, and I shamelessly said, this is my first time entering the palace, and I ran too fast in the corridors. My clothes were burned open by the dazzling light emanating from your majesty. The ministers couldn't bear to watch anymore. The most explosive leader of the conservative faction, Duke Arthur, stepped out and pointed at my nose, cursing, Your Majesty, this person behaves atrociously, uses clever words and flattering manners, and is simply an uneducated barbarian. How can he teach the crown prince? I beseech your majesty to retract the order. This old fart, I haven't even taken office and you want to smash my rice bowl? I stood up with a swoosh and stared at him. Old man, who are you? I am Duke Arthur. Have I offended you? Never. Then since I neither steal nor rob, why do you want to dismiss me? You say I use flattering words. Could it be you think his majesty is not great and not worthy of a subject's praise? I pressed him step by step, my voice loud and resonant echoing through the hall. This official is merely expressing his true feelings. In my eyes, his majesty is a unique hero, the #1 knight in the world, capable of controlling floods in civil affairs and quelling rebellions in military affairs. Every night I raise my wine glass and pray to the moon, just to entrust my feelings of reverence for his majesty. Could it be that my Valoria empire can no longer tolerate a loyal subject who speaks the truth? I covered my face, pretending to be heartbroken. Can this world get any better? It's too cold. I'm shaking with anger. Tears are flowing involuntarily. Hit by this combo of punches, Duke Arthur trembled all over, pointing at me and stuttering you for a long time, unable to squeeze out a single sentence. The civil and military officials all shut their mouths. Reasoning with a person whose face was written with shamelessness was seeking one's own death. Richard got goosebumps all over from listening and shouted angrily, Silas, how insolent! Duke Arthur is an elder statesman of 2 reigns. How can you be allowed to speak nonsense? I quickly took 2 steps back and answered loudly, Your Majesty is sagacious. Tyrants of past dynasties all loved to hear flattery. Only your majesty remains clear-headed at all times. This realm of a saint who reflects on himself daily makes this subject prostrate himself in admiration. Duke Arthur couldn't catch his breath and almost fainted. At this time, the Crown Prince's current mentor, Grand Scholar Reginald, popped out. He knelt stiffly on one knee. Your Majesty, if this treacherous person is allowed to teach the Crown Prince, I fear the Crown Prince will lose his mind and blaspheme the gods. I would rather give up my title of nobility and beg your majesty to dismiss Silas. Dismiss? My eyes instantly lit up. Dismissal is great. If I'm dismissed, I'll immediately roll back to Edenbrook to be my local emperor, who wants to stay in this broken royal capital and suffer the anger of you old nobles. I plopped down on my knees and shouted, The Grand Scholar is right. I have neither virtue nor talent. I beg your majesty to dismiss me. The ministers were all dumbfounded. This guy was just overflowing with combat power. Why did he suddenly admit defeat himself? The Richard on the throne sneered. How could he not see what I was calculating? Denied. I panicked. I really can't do it. I beg your majesty to reconsider. Richard completely lost his temper. He grabbed a heavy brass inkwell from his imperial desk and smashed it fiercely towards me. With a smack, the inkwell shattered in front of me, splashing pitch-black ink all over my body and face. Richard stood up and roared in fury. Silas, if you dare say one more word of nonsense, he'll chop off your head. Don't think I don't know what you're plotting. You must be the chief grand tutor whether you want to or not. Court dismissed. Richard left in a huff, leaving the civil and military officials staring at each other. Grand Scholar Reginald left angrily, flicking his sleeves. Courtier Sir Tristan came up, wanting to kick me while I was down and mock me. I didn't indulge him at all. I spat a thick glob of phlegm directly onto his expensive leather boots, scaring him into hopping and cursing me as a barbaric pig. I rolled my eyes and turned to leave. Before I was even out the palace gate, Chief Steward Godfrey ran over to find me. Lord Viscount, His Majesty summons you to the royal study. I immediately put on a dog-like smile, vigorously stuffed 2 draft notes of 200 gold coins each into his pocket, calling him Big Brother with every mouthful, and successfully found out that the Emperor just wanted a private chat and had no murderous intent. Entering the royal study, Richard was looking down at a parchment scroll, leaving me hanging for a full incense stick's worth of time. Seeing the timing was about right, before he could open his mouth to condemn me, I directly pulled out a thick stack of Imperial Bank gold notes from my breast pocket and held them high above my head with both hands. I know my guilt. This is the surplus of 86,524 gold coins I saved in Edenbrook over 7 years. Please, Your Majesty, accept it. Richard glanced at the stack of money and snorted coldly. Your Edenbrook is so wealthy, and in 7 years it's only this mere 80-something thousand gold coins? Do you take me for a 3-year-old child? Sweating profusely, I pretended to be extremely aggrieved. Your Majesty is perceptive. I spent money like running water on building sewers and roads. Being able to save this much is entirely due to my frugal living. Richard accepted the money, his anger mostly dissipating, and had someone offer me a seat. Let me ask you, what exactly is that thing called wrath of God? Here it comes. I knew he was coveting my gunpowder. My face sank, my eyes full of sorrow. Your Majesty, that is alchemical black powder. Unfortunately, the court alchemist who developed it blew himself up a while ago. This thing consumes too much money. I spent over 10,000 gold coins and still haven't perfected it. The territory is truly out of money, so the project had to be halted. Richard slammed the table in anger. Fool! How can such a great killing weapon be stopped? How much money do you need? I will allocate it to you. My eyes darted around and I held up 3 fingers. 40. No, 30,000 gold coins should be about right. Richard stared dead at me. 20,000 gold coins. I give you 1 year. If you can't produce the gunpowder, bring your head to see me. My heart blossomed with joy. I had already mass-produced the gunpowder, gaining 20,000 gold coins in funding out of thin air. This wave was a massive profit. But on the surface, I still pretended to look miserable and half dead, thanking him for his grace repeatedly. Richard changed the topic and asked about the Crown Prince. Edward has a wild temperament and doesn't like reading classical studies. Reginald can't teach him. I brought you here. How do you plan to teach him? I patted my chest and talked expansively about my modern educational philosophy. Your Majesty, as the saying goes, a small tree won't grow straight without pruning, and a person acts out without discipline. Filial sons come from under the wooden stick. What does the Crown Prince lack? The harsh beatings of society. If there are difficulties, face them. If there are no difficulties, create difficulties and face them. If he makes a mistake, beat him. If he doesn't make a mistake, beat him even more to extinguish the sparks of his crimes. This is called Tiger Mom and Wolf Dad style education. Richard nodded, repeatedly listening to this. Well said. It seems I didn't beat him enough in the past. Did your parents teach you this way too? I looked up at the ceiling at a 45-degree angle, my face full of vicissitudes. Indeed, I grew up being subjected to mixed doubles beatings by my parents. When I didn't want to learn swordsmanship, they would inject me with chicken blood. Now the people in our hometown still call me Fighting Cock. Richard was greatly shocked and directly threw a pure gold token engraved with the royal lion crest from his waist to me. Take it. From now on, in disciplining the Crown Prince, you can beat him as you please. If he disobeys, come find me. I caught the gold medal, fully satisfied. With this thing, couldn't I walk sideways in the Crown Prince's palace from now on? Richard looked at me covered in ink spots in disgust, drove me home, and told me to officially start work tomorrow. I took the carriage and strolled home. Just as I arrived at the door, I saw maid Bianca looking around outside. Looking at her made me angry. Why aren't you working and just wandering around here? Go stand facing the wall by the gate. You're not allowed in the house before dinner. Bianca pouted her small mouth and, with eyes full of resentment, went to squat by the wall. Entering the courtyard, I called Tessa over and pointed to the formal attire covered in ink juice. Strip this outfit off me, find a skilled craftsman to mount it in a picture frame. Hang it in the entryway at the main gate. Write a few big characters next to it in gold paint, the place of imperially bestowed holy ink. Tessa's eyes almost popped out. My lord, did you provoke his majesty into losing his temper? Hanging this out is so embarrassing. I gave a cold snort. What do you know? This is called the boundless grace of the emperor. Hurry up and get it done. Just as dinner was set on the table, and Bianca, who was watching the door, hadn't returned, an uninvited guest suddenly broke into the courtyard. It was actually old Garrick, whose house I had robbed. Read. Garrick tightly gripped a wax-sealed letter in his hand, arrogantly pointing at my nose and roaring, Silas, you provoked someone you shouldn't have provoked. You're dead meat. I held a silver plate eating roast meat, not even lifting my eyelids. Brutus, go. Give him 2 resounding slaps. Brutus lunged forward like a black bear, grabbed Garrick's collar, and delivered 2 loud smacks left and right, instantly slapping Garrick's face into a pig's head. I sneered, trespassing into a noble's mansion, and you still dare to threaten an imperial viscount? Brutus, search him. See if he's carrying a dagger. Brutus' large hands tore wildly at Garrick's body, directly tearing Garrick's clothes into rags, and finally turned out an imperial draft note of 500 gold coins from his inner pocket. My lord, found 500 gold coins. Garrick cried and screamed. This is robbery. I'm going to the Supreme Court to sue you, you bunch of robbers. Upon hearing this, I got angry, walked up to him, grabbed him by the hair, dragged him to the entryway at the main gate, and pointed at the torn clothes mounted above. Open your dog eyes and see what characters are written on there. With swollen eyes, Garrick tremblingly read out, the place of imperially bestowed holy ink. I crossed my arms and sneered. Consider yourself literate. Is this something you can look at for free? Charging you 500 gold coins as an admission ticket is letting you off cheap. Get lost, like throwing a torn gunny sack. Brutus directly tossed Garrick out onto the main street. The farce ended. Tessa picked up the letter Garrick had dropped on the ground and looked at it. It was an invitation to the Silver Swan aristocratic salon and debate sent by Julian, the son of the finance minister. It was clearly a trap. I was just planning to tear the letter up to use as toilet paper when Bianca, who was being punished by standing in the corner, walked over timidly. My lord, this is an invitation issued by the finance minister's mansion. So many minor nobles outside are dying to get one. Why don't you take it out and sell it for money? My eyes lit up. This girl has a mind for economics. I immediately made a decision, gave her a 1% commission, and told her to take the invitation to the black market tomorrow to set up a stall. Early the next morning, I changed into my new formal attire and attended court. Because I hadn't slept well yesterday, I found a marble pillar to lean on and fell asleep standing up. It wasn't until the meeting was dismissed that Chief Steward Godfrey shook me awake and sent someone to take me to the Royal Academy exclusively for the Crown Prince. As soon as I entered the courtyard, I saw a group of attendants clustering around someone walking towards me. It was precisely Crown Prince Edward, but his current appearance was a bit miserable. His nose was bruised and his face swollen, looking like a hooligan who had just been beaten in a sack. Upon seeing me, Edward's eyes lit up and he grabbed my hand. Silas, you're finally here. I missed you so much. I immediately let the actor in me take over, grasped his hand back, and shouted excitedly. As soon as this subject saw His Highness, I felt a heroic and majestic bearing, like the legendary dragon knight descending to earth. To think it was actually His Highness the Crown Prince. Truly unexpected, yet reasonable. The attendants around Edward all turned their heads, unable to bear looking at my bootlicking face. Yet Edward was moved to a complete mess. Yes, that's exactly what I thought too. Meeting you truly feels like we should have met sooner. Edward excitedly pulled me into the inner room, pulling on the bruises at the corners of his mouth, and gasped in pain. Silas, you have to save me. I don't know what got into father yesterday. He hung me upside down and beat me with an oak stick. Crown Prince Edward covered the bruises on his face, tearfully complaining to me. Hearing this, my heart bloomed with joy. The Emperor's execution power is quite good. Just taught him filial sons come from under the wooden stick yesterday, and he implemented it at night. But on the surface, I put on a heartbroken look and slapped my thigh. Your Highness, you're confused. How is this a beating? This is father's love for you. Edward was stunned. Father beating me is still loving me? Of course, I babbled nonsense with a straight face. Your Highness originally had delicate skin and tender flesh, looking like a naive pretty boy. Now with this scar added, your masculine aura instantly bursts forth. This battle-damaged makeup full of killing intent simply makes people want to draw their swords and pledge loyalty to you. His Majesty is helping you mold the majesty of an emperor for the ages. Edward was crippled by my fooling. Touching the injuries on his face, he grinned constantly. Really? I told you I was a born knight commander. Taking advantage of his happiness, I quickly pulled out a thick stack of Imperial Bank gold notes from my breast pocket, a full 10,000 gold coins, and stuffed it directly into his hand. Your Highness, this is a little token of my appreciation. From now on in the royal capital, we are blood brothers from different fathers and mothers. If you need anything, just say the word. Edward had never seen so much pocket money before, and his eyes went straight, but he still put on a fake display of declining. Is this appropriate? Brothers are like limbs. Money is like dung. If you don't accept it, it means you look down on me. Silas. Edward immediately stuffed the money into his silk sleeve, tears streaming down from being moved. Good brother, from now on in the royal capital, I've got you covered. Just after the two of us swore brotherhood, the Crown Prince's official mentor, Grand Scholar Reginald, came in with a black face. This old man found me disagreeable in every way, and he immediately started reprimanding me. Silas, His Majesty made you Chief Grand Tutor, and you dare to laugh and play around with the Crown Prince like a clown in a circus. What a disgrace. I didn't indulge him either, and directly spoke with sarcastic undertones. Lord Grand Scholar, what's wrong with the Crown Prince laughing? Could it be you couldn't laugh since you were born? Reginald trembled with anger. I am your senior in the court, even more so, the Crown Prince's academic mentor. How dare you be so insolent? The Crown Prince is also my student. Please show respect to His Highness. I didn't yield an inch and conveniently nudged Edward. Edward gathered his courage and chimed in. Right, Silas is right. Reginald went crazy, pointing at my nose and cursing loudly. You shameless nouveau riche, associating all day with physically incomplete attendants like Godfrey is simply a disgrace to gentility. Shameless. Hearing these words, the court attendants serving around and the servants who had suffered castration all lowered their heads, their eyes dim. Great opportunity. I immediately activated my best actor mode, my eye sockets instantly turning red, tears coming on command. Reginald, shut your mouth. I pointed at him, roaring with grief and indignation. What's wrong with physically incomplete people? Who does the hardest and most tiring work in the royal palace? It's them. Do you think everyone was born like you, a grand noble with fine clothes and rich food? If not for supporting their families and having no other way out, who would be willing to mutilate their own bodies to enter the palace and be servants? You, as a grand scholar well read in the classics, have not a shred of knightly compassion, opening your mouth only to speak of eunuchs. Are you fit to be the crown prince's mentor? My speech was impassioned and resonant, every word shedding blood. The attendants around were moved to tears, and the crown prince's personal attendant Leo even covered his face and whimpered. Reginald was sprayed by me until he was speechless, his old face flushing to the color of pig liver. You're twisting logic. I won't argue with a vulgar barbarian like you. I'm leaving. The old man flicked his sleeves and left in exasperation. I turned to look at the dumbfounded Edward and smiled slightly. Your Highness, today's first lesson. If you want people to submit to you willingly, you must have a sincere heart in treating others. As a result, early the next morning, Edward came to find me limping. Brother, I can't take it anymore. Yesterday father beat me up again. I want to leave the palace. My face darkened with lines. The emperor is getting addicted to beating him. Unable to withstand Edward's pestering, I had to agree to take him to the Silver Swan aristocratic salon. I had made Tessa put makeup on him, changed him into the clothes of an ordinary swordsman, brought along the humanoid weapon Brutus, and the three of us swaggered out of the palace. Arriving at the luxurious cruise ship on the Seine River, Brutus, wearing a rough guard uniform hung with leather belts, scared away all the nobles at our table. Edward looked around like a country bumpkin, while Brutus and I buried our heads in frantically eating the exquisite pastries on the table. When the cruise ship sailed into the middle of the river, the capital's most popular opera diva, Isabella, was playing the harp on the second floor to add to the fun, while downstairs a group of young nobles were shaking their heads and reciting sonnets. Right then, Finance Minister's son Julian brought a few lackeys to our door. Julian fanned his lace-trimmed folding fan, a cold sneer on his face. Lord Silas, mudlegs are mudlegs, actually dining at the same table with servants. Since you've come to the aristocratic salon, why not compose a poem to let everyone broaden their horizons? Saying that, he called out loudly to the whole audience. Everyone, this is the newly promoted Viscount of Edenbrook, Silas. Let us quietly listen to the Viscount's masterpiece. The entire venue instantly quieted down, and everyone's eyes looking at me were filled with disdain and mockery. I wiped my mouth, suppressed Brutus who wanted to flip the table, walked up to Julian, and threw my arm around his neck. I lowered my voice, full of murderous intent. Kid, want to stick up for Garrick? I'm not in the mood to play with you today. Brutus understood tacitly, and with a swish, pulled open his heavy linen cloak. By the candlelight, Julian clearly saw densely packed rows of gleaming throwing knives and poisoned short daggers hanging inside Brutus' clothes. Julian's soul scattered in terror, his legs went soft and he almost knelt down, stuttering, Viscount, misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Get lost. I sneered. Julian stumbled and crawled away, eliciting a wave of whispers from the crowd. I thought this matter was over, but I didn't expect a wrench to be thrown in the works. The heir to the Duke of Normandy, Lord Nelson, in order to rope in Julian, actually jumped out on his own initiative to cause trouble. He pulled the terrified Julian and strode up to me. Lord Silas. Nelson abruptly closed his folding fan and shouted loudly. Today, a gathering of heroes. Everyone is waiting for your masterpiece. If you don't compose a poem, wouldn't it chill the hearts of all the scholars in the empire? Incited by him, the minor nobles around immediately started jeering along. Compose one, compose one, compose one. I looked coldly at Nelson. This brother, you are very brave. Nelson showed no fear and instead mocked Brutus. Lord Viscount, bringing such a rude ogre really damages the reputation of nobles. I raised an eyebrow. There are too many demons and monsters around me, so I have to bring a rough man to hold the fort. If I brought a refined man like you, I'd have been killed long ago. A burst of laughter immediately erupted all around. Nelson's face turned green. You, Silas, cut the crap. If you have guts, compose a poem. I sighed. Originally, I didn't want to show off like this. You forced me. Bring a quill and parchment. I walked to the desk, waved my pen, and directly translated a quatrain from the Eastern graceful school into a sorrowful Western sonnet, Autumn Farewell Song. The autumn wind whimpers among the desolate oaks. The sudden rain has just stopped. The evening bell strikes the city gates of farewell. The red wine in the tent is bitter and hard to swallow. The sailing ships afar urge the reluctant souls. Since ancient times, passionate people are left with the scars of parting in vain. Not to mention in this cold and desolate autumn season. Waking up from wine tonight, where shall I rest? Is it by the shore shaded by weeping willows, or accompanied by the cold, incomplete moon of the morning? After this departure through the years, all beautiful times and sceneries become empty setups. Even though I have 1,000 kinds of romantic feelings in my heart, writing up to here, my quill suddenly stopped. Fuck me, what were the last two lines again? My brain went completely blank. I wasn't even this nervous reciting from memory during my college entrance exams in my past life. Hundreds of pairs of eyes in the venue stared dead at the tip of my pen, and even Crown Prince Edward swallowed nervously. I held the quill, frozen in place, and the scene became awkward to the extreme. The entire venue was dead silent, everyone holding their breath waiting for me to put pen to paper, and Lord Nelson was even so nervous he was wiping cold sweat. Lord Viscount, why aren't you writing? My face didn't redden and my heart didn't skip a beat. I slapped my large hand on the oak desk. When writing this sonnet, this baron's inspiration flowed like a spring, absolutely enough to win the title of Poet Laureate of the court. But today I only want to be a spectator, so the remaining 2 lines can very well be completed by everyone here. This is called leaving blank practice in rhetoric. I guarantee to recommend the winner to the Royal Academy. The nobles present suddenly realized, repeatedly touching their chests and bowing to praise my high righteousness. Finance Minister's son Julian's face turned green, and he gritted his teeth. Then why doesn't Lord Silas tell the romantic story behind this poem, so that we can ponder and learn? Still going? Refusing the face given, huh? My face sank. What if I won't tell? Nelson sneered. Unless you didn't write it. Without telling the origin, wouldn't everyone be drawing a snake and adding legs? This makes things very difficult for us. An atmosphere of drawn swords and bent bows instantly filled the venue. I suddenly laughed. Difficult? Fuck it, then don't do it. As soon as my voice fell, Brutus behind me instantly erupted, his monstrous arm strength exploding as he directly flipped the heavy mahogany round table, smashing it fiercely down on Julian and Nelson. These 2 goods didn't even have time to react before being solidly crushed under the table board. The moment the table board fell, Brutus and I, in perfect tacit understanding, uniformly jumped onto the table board. Crown Prince Edward paused for a second, his eyes lit up, and he followed suit, jumping up. Come, let's see who jumps higher. Alright, the 3 of us then crazily jumped like in a disco on the table board, dancing a vulgar rustic tap dance. Pig-slaughtering screams erupted from under the table. The nobles and literati in the venue were so scared they shrank into the corners of the cabin, not daring to breathe loudly. Silas, you have the guts of a dog. I am the son of the finance minister. You're finished. Julian crazily clamored from underneath. Upon hearing this, my anger grew even larger, and I bounced even more vigorously. Edward's face was totally red, so excited he couldn't stop. It wasn't until hearing the movement of the cruise ship docking that the people in the hall ran completely clean like they had seen ghosts. Figuring I had vented enough anger, I took the lead in jumping off the table. Brutus lifted the table board. The 2 goods underneath had already been stomped to the point of vomiting blood, their breath weak. I grabbed Julian's pomaded hair and said viciously, "Gave you a chance and you're useless." Julian completely chickened out, begging in terror. I was wrong. Lord Viscount, spare my life. I slammed him onto the carpet, turned to look at the pretending to be fainted Nelson, and gave him a leather boot right to the face. Nelson let out a miserable cry, and this time he really fainted. Venting anger felt good, but how to clean up the aftermath? Western nobles value honor and face the most, so let's give them a big one. Brutus, strip them naked, stack them on the table. Brutus was quick-handed and fast-footed. Stripping the 2 of their velvet formal were clean in a few moves. Julian was half lying face down, Nelson stacked on top, the picture simply burning the eyes. To make it realistic, I picked up a jug of strong liquor and poured it over them, making them reek of alcohol. Just then a maid passed by, scared into dropping her tray. I immediately told her to call all 30-plus servants preparing food in the ship's cabin over. When the people gathered and saw the 2 white-cut chickens on the table, they were all dumbfounded. I pointed at them with a heartbroken look. Everyone look, these 2 violated knightly virtues, openly committing illicit acts after drinking, and actually fainted from pleasure. As the Crown Prince's chief grand tutor, how can this official tolerate such vile deeds that violate God's teachings? But considering they are nobles, everyone must keep this strictly confidential. Whoever dares to spread it, don't blame me for not being polite. The crowd looked at each other, thinking in their hearts, you called us here just to let us see this? Are you sick? I picked up a basin of ice water and splashed Julian and the other awake. Opening their eyes and seeing themselves stacked naked with a circle of commoner servants surrounding them, their faces instantly turned deathly pale, covering their crucial parts and shivering. I stepped forward, looking down from above with a sneer. Did it feel good? Looking at my devilish smile, Julian broke down and shouted, "Good, good." Nelson also desperately echoed, "Very good." I called out the names of the 30-plus servants. I've memorized the names of everyone present today. If anyone meets Whithon accident, even a sprained ankle, they'll count it on both your heads. Understand? The 2 had ferocious expressions, gritting their teeth. Understood. All right, do you know how to explain to your noble fathers when you get home? Tears in his eyes, Julian said. I drank too much, got into a verbal altercation with the Lord, nothing more. I nodded in satisfaction and enthusiastically helped them drape their clothes on. Hurry home, don't catch a cold. The 2 stumbled and crawled as they fled the cruise ship. Edward rubbed his hands excitedly, feeling that the world outside the palace was simply too exciting. Once the people left, I immediately directed Brutus to bring out linen sacks and frantically pack up the unspoiled roast meat and pastries on the table. At this time, the personal maid of the opera diva Isabella came down to invite me upstairs. Holding the sack, I entered her boudoir. Isabella sat with her back to me inside a gossamer tent, coquettishly offering to play the harp for me. I had no time to listen to tunes. I directly pointed at the snacks on the table and asked if she was going to eat them. She said she wouldn't, so I swiftly dumped all the snacks into the sack, turned and left, leaving this royal capital socialite messy in the wind, still saying shyly, "Isabella is still of pure body. Please show pity, my lord." Sorry, this young master only loves to pack leftovers. Coming out of the cruise ship, I took Edward for a stroll on the streets. Edward was thrilled and asked me why I didn't hold back. This is called letting the tiger return to the mountain will lead to it biting back. As long as he finds it too embarrassing to admit, even if the whole capital knows about it, it will be treated as if nothing happened. Passing a tramp, Edward excitedly dumped half a sack of leftovers into the man's bowl. The tramp was dumbfounded looking at the mountain of leftovers. I quickly stopped him and gave him a lesson on the sinister nature of society. Ahead was a blind beggar rolling his eyes, with a few copper coins in his torn hat. I walked over and grabbed the copper coins into my sleeve. The blind man instantly jumped up, staring dead at me. I held out 2 hands. Poor beggar, did you drop the copper coins in my left hand, or the silver coins in my right hand? Without a thought, the beggar's eyes lit up. Right hand. Wrong answer, confiscated. The beggar was stunned, stopped pretending, and his eyes turned fierce. Brutus took a step forward, opened his cloak to reveal his miniature armory, and the beggar immediately rolled his eyes back and obediently squatted back down. Edward watched in amazement, went up and delivered 2 kicks, and a few more pennies fell out of the beggar's torn clothes. With quick hands and sharp eyes, I collected them all. Next, we encountered a disabled beggar with no legs. I walked over, picked up his cracked wooden bowl, poured the money into my sleeve, and then forcefully tossed the bowl far away. A miracle occurred. The disabled beggar, who was just kneeling on the ground, suddenly sprouted legs, catapulted toward the broken bowl, and ran faster than a rabbit. Edward's worldview collapsed, his face full of bitterness. So everything you said was true. I was really blind. Silas, how did you tell? I stood with my hands behind my back, my face full of vicissitudes. Back when I was about to starve to death in Edenbrook, I led all the old, weak, sick, and disabled of the territory to beg in other places. From pretending to be blind and disabled, to pregnant women running scams, to staging melodramas to sell misery, I forcefully built up a beggars guild and appointed myself as president. I even established a finance officer, street law enforcement officers, and rolled out a whole system in the begging industry. At that time, a song Tears of the Gypsies went viral across the entire province. This is all stuff I've already played with. Hearing of my glorious past, Edward prostrated himself in admiration. On the other side, Julian and Nelson supported each other and fled back to the finance minister's mansion. As soon as they entered the main gate, Julian's eyes revealed a fierce glint. He pointed at Nelson and roared, "Beat him to death for me." He vented all his pent-up anger on Nelson and his own lackey, Garrick. The night guard swung wooden clubs, aiming specifically for Nelson's face, forcefully beating him into a pig's head. Finance Minister Giles was alarmed by the commotion. Coming out to take a look and seeing his son in a miserable state, he angrily asked what happened. Julian hugged his father's thigh and wailed loudly. While heartbroken, Giles pressed to ask if Silas did it. Whenever Julian thought of the image of being stripped naked and stacked underneath, he remained as stubborn as a dead duck. Not really, just got into a verbal altercation with Silas. Smack! Furious, Giles slapped Julian across the face and roared, "Useless trash, bullied by someone, and you don't even dare to let out a fart." With a shadowless kick, he kicked Julian over, ordered him locked in his room, turned around, and decided to ruthlessly impeach me in the Supreme Council. In the middle of the night, Lord Nelson, beaten into a pig's head, was thrown out of the minister's mansion like a torn gunny sack, just in time to be picked up by the fabric merchant Chandler. The peerless young girl Bianca was still an underclass maid in my mansion, suffering my anger every day. Seeing Nelson's miserable state, her imagination ran wild, thinking I ignored her because I was naturally impotent or only liked men. Filled with grievance, she ran back to the manor, just in time for me to get off work. I pulled out a few copper coins covered in saliva and stuffed them to her as her commission. Looking at the copper coins in her palm, her mindset completely collapsed, and she cried wah and ran into the mansion. I laughed. Making a little money makes her this happy, what a silly girl. 2 days later, at the morning court session, Chief Steward Godfrey read the poem I copied, Autumn Farewell Song, with deep emotion. The civil and military officials were enchanted listening to it, and Prime Minister Ward even shed tears on the spot, outright calling these lines kissed by the god of the Renaissance. Emperor Richard, his face glowing red, looked at me smilingly. "Silas, everyone is curious. Why is this poem missing 2 lines? The entire venue's gaze focused on me. I was panicking inside. I hadn't even memorized the whole piece. How could I explain it? Crown Prince Edward beside me was desperately holding back laughter, just waiting to see me make a joke. I took a deep breath and started flexing my acting skills. My face full of grief and indignation, my eye sockets turning red. "Your Majesty." This subject worked diligently in Edenbrook, toiling day and night for the commoners, only to discover that everything in the world always has its flaws. This subject once fell seriously ill for 3 days and 3 nights, and finally comprehended a truth. Just like the armless statue of Venus, incompleteness is also a kind of imperfect divinity. Therefore, this subject deliberately left blanks in the poem. This is called the beauty of incompleteness. The ministers rolled their eyes listening to this. Even this can be spun? But with my bout of fooling, Richard actually fell into deep thought, and the ministers even began to fill in the words in their own minds. Feeling better the more they filled, one by one feeling it made sense. Right at this moment, Finance Minister Giles jumped out, pointing at my nose and loudly cursing, "Your Majesty, this subject wishes to impeach Silas for openly assaulting my son Julian. I spread my hands, my face entirely innocent. Your Majesty, this is absolutely a false accusation. We just had a bit of a verbal altercation. Giles became exasperated and directly called Julian and that barred witness to the court. Richard stared coldly at Julian. Did Silas hit you or not? I chimed in leisurely. Your Majesty, Lord Julian drank too much that night, and we were playing the Roman Bacchus pyramid, which is stacking wine glasses higher and higher. How could we have fought? Hearing the 3 words stacking glasses, Julian trembled all over like sifting chaff. His mind was full of the image of himself naked, stacked underneath. If he admitted to being beaten, that matter definitely couldn't be kept secret. Weighing the pros and cons, Julian gritted his teeth, wanting to cry but lacking tears. Replying to Your Majesty, this subject was indeed playing the Roman pyramid. Silas didn't hit me. As soon as this sentence came out, Giles was struck like lightning. Eyes wide open, he pointed at his son, almost spraying a mouthful of old blood. Seeing it was good to stop while ahead, I waved my hand magnanimously. Since it's a misunderstanding and this subject is used to being targeted, let's just let this matter go. The way the ministers looked at me changed. They actually felt that I was a broad-minded person. Richard's dragon countenance showed great joy, and he directly kicked Giles and his son out. After court, Richard called me to the royal study, getting straight to the point. The tea isn't selling anymore. Do you have any ideas? So the high-priced tea had harvested the leeks too ruthlessly, and the royal capital's noble market was saturated. I had a well-thought-out plan. Your Majesty, this is simple. Segment the market. Well, make longevity tea for the old nobles, packaged as dew of the Holy Grail. Beauty tea for the madams, called Siren's Song, and aphrodisiac tea for the young knights, called Blood of the God of War. The packaging must be luxurious, the mythological stories must be spun perfectly, and then find theaters and socialites for joint marketing. Most importantly, lower the price. Leeks must be harvested crop by crop. Richard's eyes lit up listening to this. I hand this business over to you and give you a 10% cut of the profits. Deal. Richard looked at me with increasing satisfaction. You kid really know how to make money. Nowadays, the state treasury is empty, lacking both money and grain. Do you have any ways to produce grain? I sighed. Not even a shadow of the new continent's god-tier crops like potatoes and sweet potatoes had been found, so I could only shake my head helplessly. Right at this moment, Godfrey stumbled and rushed into the royal study, sweating profusely. Your Majesty, bad news. The royal chief physician says Her Highness the Princess is not going to make it. Richard's expression changed drastically. He stood up abruptly and rushed toward the inner palace like a madman. I froze in place, having not yet reacted. Hearing this, Crown Prince Edward also jumped with anxiety. I grabbed the Crown Prince's attendant Leo, using can make your lower part grow back as bait to have him lead the way, and ran all the way, chasing to the princess' bedchamber. Upon entering, Richard and Edward's faces were full of sorrow. I poked my head over the velvet large bed to take a look and was stunned on the spot. The princess lying on the bed had skin like congealed fat and cherry-like small lips. Even with a face full of sickness, she was still a top-tier beauty of the pure and desire aesthetic ceiling level. Richard lamented, 10 years. Why has this strange illness not been cured for 10 years? I turned to stare at the royal physician who claimed to have treated her lung disease for 10 years and grabbed his silk collar. Old man, what illness hasn't been cured after 10 years of treatment? The physician looked disdainful. It is a rare lung consumption disease. Even if I told a country noble like you, you wouldn't understand. Hearing this, my eyes instantly changed. I looked at physician Hugo, who claimed to have treated her lung disease for 10 years, marveling internally that this quack hadn't killed the princess despite changing expensive herbal medicines for 10 years. The way I looked at him completely changed. Changing prescriptions for 10 years and still hasn't killed the patient. This old man is a divine doctor. Being stared at by me like this, Hugo shuddered in fright. I couldn't be bothered with him and pulled Crown Prince Edward out of the hall. Edward leaned against a marble pillar, his eye sockets red. Brother, Victoria is my dearest sister. If she goes to see God, what will I do? Before I could comfort him, he jerked his head up, staring dead at me. Silas, do you want a wife or not? My head was full of question marks. Edward said urgently, the Church's ancient texts speak of divine blessing marriage. He'll marry Victoria to you. Let's try using the holy light of a pure marriage to disperse the diseased demon. If it were any other noble I'd rather die than agree, but you're the one. I was speechless looking at the sky. Shoving a dying princess onto me? This is repaying kindness with enmity. I smiled bitterly. Your Highness, if getting married could cure diseases, there would be no dead people in the world long ago. Edward's mindset completely collapsed. He grabbed my shoulders and shook them frantically. Then what do you say we do? I threw him off and shouted loudly, calm down. Why roar so loudly? I have a method, but the hope is slim. There is a divine medicine called penicillin that can cure all diseases. Hearing this, Edward bounced up, light instantly returning to his eyes. Good. Tell me how to get it. Say it and do it. The two of us immediately rushed back to the Crown Prince's palace, got a few baskets of oranges, and threw them into the dark, damp cellar to mold. When the blue mold was fully grown, we used wheat to boil a culture medium and picked the bluest strain to dot onto it. After a week of fermentation, I added olive oil to stir and purify, and then repeatedly filtered it using charcoal, vinegar, and alkaline water from the imperial kitchen. No filter paper, just use the premium toilet paper unique to my Edenbrook, sun-dried to sterilize. For rigor, I set up 27 experimental groups. All instruments were boiled in water at high temperatures for sterilization, and even the syringes were purely handcrafted by the court silversmith. For a full half-month, I stayed up until my eyes were entirely red, finally bringing out 27 silver bowls filled with penicillin. Looking at these trans-era products, heroic pride surged in my heart. Silas, what next? Edward swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Bring up the death row inmates. 3 days later, in a secret royal dungeon in the capital, over 50 notorious, evil-doing death row inmates were gathered in the cells. With my hands behind my back, I looked at them coldly. Today, we test a new medicine for the warriors of the Empire. After the injection, report your feelings truthfully. In the autumn, everyone gets a reward of 20 gold coins, and if the experiment succeeds, you will be pardoned from the death penalty. I object. You demon just want to kill us. A bandit with a face full of fierce flesh shouted. Slap his mouth. The jailer rushed in and gave 2 loud slaps with an iron-gloved hand. The entire venue instantly quieted down. I nodded in satisfaction and personally took action. The first one was an intravenous injection. My hands shook so much I was sweating cold sweat. For the second one, I just had him take off his pants and injected it into his buttocks. This was handy. Over 50 people injected one by one. An hour later, Edward, wearing plain clothes, rushed into the dungeon shouting and hollering. Silas, how are the death row inmates? Succeeded, right? The torches flickered in the dungeon. With my back to him, I turned around slowly, my voice filled with endless sorrow. They're all dead. Edward was struck like lightning. What? Over 50 people are all dead. I didn't say a word and yanked off the rough cloth curtain behind me. Corpses lying crisscross filled the cell. Some convulsed wildly before dying, some vomited everywhere. Their dying states were extremely miserable. The surrounding jailers were so scared their legs trembled wildly, looking at me as if looking at a living llama. Some even wet their pants. Edward slumped to the ground, tears bursting from his eyes. How could this happen? Is it really beyond saving? I helped him up and told him to return to the palace first. Looking at the floor full of corpses, I couldn't help but sigh, yet a bitter smile helplessly tugged at the corners of my mouth. The jailers gasped. He smiled. This devil poisoned over 50 people to death, and he actually smiled. From then on, the legend of the royal capital's dungeon poison king would accompany me for the rest of my life. Penicillin was declared a failure, and the princess fell critically ill again. Edward was in a daze all day and didn't even go to his night training. My role as chief grand tutor offered no sense of experience, so I decided to investigate personally. Taking advantage of the physician's absence, I sneaked into the princess' bedchamber, casually pulled out an 80 gold coin draft note, knocked a little maid dizzy with it, and had her take me to the royal greenhouse where the princess often went before her attacks. Entering the garden, the floral fragrance assailed my nostrils. I pointed at the purplish red flowers filling the garden and asked, "What are these?" "This is the siren's sigh. It's the princess' favorite flower, blooming all year round." The princess even picked a large bouquet before she fell ill. My mouth twitched. To hell with a rare lung consumption disease. This is fucking pollen allergy. Kudos to her frail body for enduring 10 years without actually dying. If I had found this out earlier, why would I have caused the penicillin bloodbath? I ran all the way back to the Crown Prince's palace and shouted at Edward, who was staring blankly at a statue of the Virgin Mary. "Your Highness, the princess' illness can be saved." Edward looked up, his expression complex. "Silas, you've thought it through? You agreed to marry my sister to dispel the bad luck?" My face darkened. "Marry my ass. I found the cause of the illness." I dragged him straight to the princess' bedchamber and explained the matter of the pollen allergy originally and completely. Although Edward didn't understand what allergies were, he unhesitatingly ordered the greenhouse garden to be uprooted entirely. Just as we entered the bedchamber, we saw Chief Physician Hugo holding a steaming pot of medicinal soup. "What is this?" Edward frowned. Hugo had a flattering face. Replying to your highness, this is the mysterious mandrake I just spent 2,000 gold coins to buy from a merchant returning from the new continent. It will absolutely have a miraculous effect on the princess. I sneered. 10 years of tonics and she hasn't gotten better. You old geezer didn't poison her, did you? Hugo was so scared he sweated profusely. Edward had long disliked him, went up and delivered a kick, kicking Hugo to the ground. With a clang, the brass soup pot smashed to pieces, and the mandrake inside rolled out. I was just about to stop Edward when my peripheral vision swept over the mud on the ground, and my whole body instantly stiffened. Blood veins crept into my eyeballs little by little. The thing on the ground, slender, with roots, emitting a familiar sweet smell. This is a fucking sweet potato. The god-tier crop from the new continent that I had been searching for years, actually stewed as a mandrake in the royal palace by someone. Like a mad dog, I violently pounced forward, pinched Hugo's neck in a death grip, and roared, "I'll strangle you, you old geezer. Speak, where did you get this thing? Are there any more?" Hugo rolled his eyes. In the royal pharmacy. Edward tightly hugged me. "Silas, let go. Strangling him will cause trouble." I let go, wild joy surging in my heart. I struck it rich. The empire is going to take off. Without hesitation, I picked up the mud-covered rotten sweet potato on the ground and stuffed it into my mouth. The taste was very bland, but it was absolutely a sweet potato. No mistake. Edward watched dumbfounded and also dug out a piece to taste. "What disease does this thing cure?" he asked. "Cures the disease of poverty. Cures the disease of hunger." I hauled up the pretending to be dead Hugo. "Go to the pharmacy." At the pharmacy, courtesy, Hugo humiliatingly dug out a velvet box. Inside lay quietly 3 sweet potatoes not even as thick as a thumb. I pointed at the box, lowering my voice to say to Edward, "This is called a sweet potato. 1 acre of land can produce over 1,000 pounds. Plant it successfully, and there will be peace under heaven. You personally hold it tight." Edward's eyes almost popped out, and he tightly guarded the box in his arms. I turned to interrogate Simon, the royal purchasing officer who bought this herb. Simon honestly said he met the foreign merchant at the port of Solis. Besides this divine grass, there was also a weird root covered in yellow boils with whiskers, which he didn't buy because he thought it was poisonous since it was rotten. A root covered in yellow bumps? With whiskers? That's fucking corn. You bunch of blind trash. Corn was just mist like this. I forcefully suppressed the urge to vomit blood, threw my arm around Simon's shoulder, and asked sinisterly, "You said you spent 2,000 gold coins on this thing?" Simon shuddered in fright. Really? I sneered, casually pointing at Edward. "See what His Highness the Crown Prince is holding in his arms?" Just now a palace maid lied, and His Highness directly twisted her head off to kick as a ball. "Tell the truth, exactly how much did it cost?" Simon glanced at the murderous Crown Prince, his teeth chattering. Two silver coins. Not only did he spend 2 silver coins and expense 2,000 gold coins, this kid also confessed to secretly hoarding 2 baskets of sweet potatoes. I was overjoyed. "No matter how much you hid, send it all to the Crown Prince's palace immediately. Where are the gold notes you embezzled?" With a long face, Simon pulled out 2 imperial gold notes with a face value of 1,000. "Lord Viscount, save me. I didn't dare spend a single copper coin of this money." With quick hands and sharp eyes, I stuffed all 2,000 gold coins into my sleeve. "Don't worry, this baron has got you covered." Out the door, I pulled out 1,000 gold coins and handed them to Edward. Edward was stunned. "Silas, what are you doing?" I spoke with righteous awe. "This kid falsified the accounts. This is the recovered stolen money." Edward gritted his teeth. "These parasites. Wait, wasn't it 2,000 gold coins? Where's the remaining 1,000? I hardened my face and patted my sleeve. "I'm saving it for your highness." Having secured the sweet potatoes, I immediately ran to the royal study to find Richard. "Your Majesty, this subject has found the cause of the princess' illness. It is a pollen allergy. As long as she stays away from those flowers, there is a 90% certainty of full recovery. Chief Steward Godfrey can guarantee this with his head." Beside him, the fat on Godfrey's face twitched madly, wishing he could stab me to death with his eyes. Richard was overjoyed. "Good. Silas has rendered a great merit. I shall reward you heavily." I took the opportunity to make a request. This subject wishes to ask for a long leave to return to Edenbrook. Firstly, with the princess critically ill, the crown prince has no mind for studying. Secondly, this subject needs to personally go back to supervise the high-end tea business. Richard thought for a moment, considered the incoming gold coins, and readily granted the leave. When I told the crown prince, Edward anxiously wanted to follow. I stopped him. "You can't go. The matter of me poisoning 50 death row inmates is about to explode. The Privy Council will definitely impeach me. You must stay in the court to tank the thunder for me. If you want me to die, then come with me." Looking extremely aggrieved, Edward could only watch helplessly as I packed my bags, brought those 2 baskets of sweet potatoes and the penicillin research notes, and stepped onto the carriage returning to Edenbrook. After half a day of bumping, the carriage finally entered Edenbrook territory. Maid Tessa vomited a mess in the carriage. I popped out of the carriage and took a deep breath. "Edenbrook, your lord has returned." Just as I was rejoicing, a serf by the roadside saw me and, as if seeing a ghost, screamed and ran madly toward the city. Subsequently, everyone I met along the way ran towards the city like mad dogs. My face turned black. Did the unruly subjects rebel? When the carriage reached the city gate, I realized it was a misunderstanding. The city gate was densely packed with people. Acting Consul Austin took the lead, flanked by a row of commoner children holding wild flowers. Behind them was a huge linen banner, "Warmly welcome the return of Lord Viscount Silas to the territory." As soon as I showed my head, the children shouted in unison at the top of their lungs, "Welcome, welcome, a warm welcome." Isn't this the exact trick I used back then to fool the Royal Inspector Oswald? I roared loudly, "Enough, that's fucking enough. I'm not a freshly carried out funeral procession." This shout scared a few children into crying, and the procession fell into chaos. The commoners, however, went crazy with joy. "It really is the Lord. This cursing flavor is totally authentic. My lord, please call me an idiot again." My head was covered in black lines. This bunch of masochists. Returning to the Lord's Hall, Austin reported the work of the past half-month to me. The literacy campaign progressed smoothly. 70% of the people could already recognize common imperial characters. Street garbage sorting had shown initial results. The theater troupe in town rehearsed a melodramatic stage play called The Crazy Manor Lord, which became a smash hit in the city, but the actors played their evil roles too well, and the entire cast was beaten into the clinic by overly immersed audience members. The glass workshop had a technological breakthrough, producing pure glass without bubbles. Overjoyed, I immediately slapped the penicillin notes onto the table. "Take this secret manual. Have the glass workshop combine convex and concave surfaces to make telescopes and microscopes for me. Then find a group of herbalists, continue purifying penicillin, and use monkeys and rabbits for experiments." Austin nodded repeatedly, then reported, "My lord, recently several waves of spies have infiltrated the city. There are 6 claiming to be heretics of the Abyssal Sea God cult, and 5 are spies sent by the royal capital's finance minister Giles." I was amused, quite a lot of petty tricks. Bring them up for a look. 11 people were escorted into the hall. Austin shouted loudly, "What is our goal?" The 11 people snapped to attention with a smack and roared in unison like royal knights. To fight lifelong to build Edenbrook into the most prosperous, civilized, and glory-filled territory in the entire empire. The 6 heretics even excitedly added a sentence. "For Edenbrook, I am willing to sacrifice my blood." I turned to glare at Austin. "I left for a few days and you even changed the brainwashing teaching materials?" Austin wiped his sweat frantically. "We didn't change it, my lord. These 6 heretics act like they're injected with chicken blood every day. Not only do they work frantically in the quarry, except for the money to buy black bread, they handed in all the rest as taxes." I got angry. "Aren't these psychopaths? Suspend these 6. Send them to the monastery to be remade. Only let them out when they learn how to be a normal lazy bum. Don't ruin my citizens." The remaining 5 people were sent by Giles. The burly man leading them had tears in his eyes. "Lord Viscount, we used to live like dogs in the royal capital. We only knew what life was when we came to Edenbrook. We get to drink meat soup every day. We're not going back." One of the brothers has already returned to the capital to pick up his old mother to settle here. I clapped my hands and laughed. Edenbrook's sugar-coated bullets are invincible. After dealing with the spies, I heard that the former royal inspector Oswald, who had been stripped of his knighthood, had actually moved into Edenbrook's affluent district to settle down. Not only did this old boy visit the Silver Moon Tavern every day to find girls, but he also personally wrote melodramatic multi-angled romance scripts, forcing prostitutes to act with him. I immediately sent someone to bring him to the main hall. Oswald, trembling, knelt on one knee on the floor. Commoner Oswald kowtows to Lord Viscount. This old fox had learned to be obedient, actually calling himself a commoner. I decided to beat the drum on him. "Oswald, you scraped quite a lot of grease when you were an official in the royal capital back then, right? This baron is now the crown prince's mentor, and my eyes can't tolerate sand." Before I could finish, Oswald tremblingly pulled out a large stack of imperial gold notes from his breast pocket and laid them out squarely on the floor. "My lord, all 7,600 gold coins of this commoner's illegal gains are here. There are also 500 gold coins, which is the hush money you gave. Please inspect clearly." I touched my nose. The dog learned to answer preemptively. I picked up those 500 gold coins and threw them back to him. "Take it and keep your mouth shut in the territory." To squeeze dry his surplus value, I decided to arrange a job for him. Go to the territory dungeon and help interrogate prisoners. You don't need to do anything else, just sing. ABA, ABA, ABA. A weird sound suddenly came from the side. I turned to look. It was a mute. Guard Rufus quickly stepped forward to translate. "My lord, this is old William, the mute bartender from the tavern. He ruined his voice singing on the streets in the past, and I arranged for him to run errands in the castle. He says if Oswald doesn't know how to sing, he can teach him." I drew a breath of cold air, staring at Rufus. "You can understand a mute speaking?" Rufus smiled shyly. "I can guess the gist by looking at the eyes and listening to the sounds. Last month, in the case of the farmer abusing his neighbor's little ewe, I solved the case precisely by understanding the ewe's bleats." Good heavens, a humanoid self-walking translation machine, and cross-species too. The overseas merchants at the port of Solis were just worrying about the inability to communicate. This talent absolutely cannot be let go. "Rufus, follow me into the royal capital." Staying in Edenbrook for a few days, the sweet potatoes were heavily guarded by me and planted in the most fertile experimental fields directly belonging to the Lord. Simple versions of microscopes and magnifying glasses were also produced. Although rough, they could see the microorganisms in the water. Before leaving, I had the paper mill and the textile workshop jointly rush produce a large batch of a Trans-Era product sanitary pads. The ancients in the Middle Ages viewed women's menstrual periods as fierce beasts, using plant ash or even torn linen cloth, which was extremely unsanitary and could even be seen by the church as unclean. I planned to promote this thing first among the high-end noble ladies in the royal capital, change the social climate, and make money in passing. Carrying a carriage full of sanitary pads, I returned to the Viscount's mansion in the royal capital. At dinner, the long dining table was piled with sanitary pads like a small mountain. Looking at this bizarre style without wings and with linen strings at the 4 corners, I fell into deep thought. This thing, how exactly is it used? I humbly asked for guidance. As soon as my voice fell, Brutus and Rufus silently turned and left the hall. Maid Tessa and Bianca's faces flushed totally red, covering their faces and not daring to look at me. "My lord, what are you doing with this thing? It's deadly shameful." Tessa stamped her feet in anxiety. I slapped the table angrily, hiding one's sickness for fear of treatment. "This is a major matter concerning women's health. Tessa, you tell me, what are these 4 strings for?" Tessa said with a muffled voice. Tied around the waist." I suddenly realized the ancients didn't have underpants. This is yet another good business selling silk sexy lingerie. Seeing them still twisting and turning, my temper flared up. From today on, all women in the entire mansion, each person receives 3 pads for free every day. Must use. After using, you must report your thoughts to me, whether there was any side leakage. Tessa, you are responsible for distributing them. Tessa wished she could die of shame. Bianca looked at me in horror through her fingers, her eyes seemingly saying, "This lord is absolutely a pervert." Edward rushed into the Viscount's mansion burning with urgency, his face full of excitement as he waved a parchment letter. "Silas, the royal capital is shaken. The matter of you using poison to kill 50 death row inmates has blown up." I yawned and stretched unhurriedly, Blow up then, what's the big deal? Come, follow me into the palace, I'll show you some good treasures. Arriving at the Crown Prince's palace, just as I sat down, that castrated personal attendant Leo stared dead at me with shining eyes. Stared at by him until my hair stood on end. I changed my mind, this guy is probably still thinking about me helping him make his lower part grow back. Holding back laughter, I pulled out a magnifying glass with a brass handle from my bag and handed it to him. This is the alchemical divine artifact mirror of restored glory. Wherever is short, shine it there, guaranteed to become bigger. Leo was overjoyed, snatched the magnifying glass, and ran to a corner drooling. Edward leaned over puzzled. Silas, is this thing really useful? I sneered, pulled out another magnifying glass, and gestured towards the silver teacup on the table. The cup instantly doubled in size in my line of sight. Edward watched dumbfounded, snatched it away, and shone it everywhere, clicking his tongue in wonder. Good stuff. Father's eyes are dim. With this, reading the Privy Council's documents will be no worry. My heart warmed. This kid is quite filial. I pulled him into the courtyard to teach him how to use the magnifying glass to focus light and burn ants. Just as the two of us were playing vigorously, Leo ran back crying like he had lost his parents. Lord Viscount, it's useless. It looks bigger after shining, but it's still broken. I patted his shoulder, my words long and profound. Leo, how can life be 10 out of 10 perfect? Looking big and really being big are the same in optics. Living a few more years is better than anything. In the future, when you miss your brother, just take it out and shine it. Leo cried Wawa in anger, cursed liar, turned, and ran away. Edward was so amused he kept slapping his thigh, suddenly lowering his voice. Brother, during these days you were gone. The court was strangely quiet. No one impeached you. I feel those old geezers in the Privy Council are holding back a big ultimate move. I waved my hand. Let them be. How is the princess' illness? Completely cured. Victoria even said she wants to thank you in person. Let's go. I'll accompany you. Edward stared at me warily, deeply afraid I had ulterior motives toward his sister. Arriving at the princess' bedchamber, Princess Victoria walked out gracefully. After recovering from her illness, she appeared even more youthful and lively, a proper royal pure and desire aesthetic ceiling. Pretentiously, I inspected the uprooted garden, cleared my throat, and prepared to unleash my ultimate girl flirting skills. The princess has just recovered from a severe illness. Ordinarily, you must drink more hot chamomile tea. Edward aggressively rolled his eyes beside me, sneering to tear down my stage. Drink more hot tea, and then what? I got stuck. Nothing more. You can add some honey. The scene was extremely awkward for a moment. To smooth things over, Victoria pointed at my linen bundle and asked, Lord Viscount, is what's inside a specialty of Edenbrook? Feeling as if granted a general amnesty, I quickly opened the bundle. Yes, 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 princess. Taste our territory's candied nuts. Before I could finish speaking, my eyes went straight. Maid Tessa, that idiot, actually slipped a few sanitary pads underneath the nut jar. Edward was quick-handed. He snatched one out, held the 4 linen strings, looked left and right, and said triumphantly, I get it. Father said to guard against flood plagues. These 4 strings are definitely for tying on the head to cover the mouth and nose as an anti-epidemic mask, right? Saying that, he was about to slap it on his face. I broke out in a cold sweat and snatched it away. Are you kidding me? If you wear it on your face, how am I going to sell it to those noble ladies in the future? Victoria leaned over curiously. My lord, what exactly is this? Since things had come to this point, I hardened my heart. This is called the pad of purity. Something women use when their monthly menarche arrives. The air instantly froze. Victoria's face flushed swish red to the base of her ears, and she abruptly lowered her head. The little maids around also blushed, not daring to look at anyone. Edward let out a weird cry, slapped the pad of purity onto the ground, pointed at me, and cursed loudly. Silas, you're too perverted. What decent noble man carries this kind of thing around with him? My defenses completely broke. I rolled up my velvet sleeves and roared angrily. Perverted? Do you think I, Silas, a dignified 7-foot man, don't feel embarrassed walking around with this thing? I am doing this for the women of the entire empire. I pointed at the pad of purity on the ground, my voice resounding like thrown stones. Do you know how painful it is for women when their menses come? Using unclean rags and plant ash, how many women get infected and lose their lives because of it, and are even accused by the church of being unclean? As a local lord, how could I sit by and watch? I am seeking health and dignity for the women of the world. Edward scoffed. High-sounding words. Don't think I don't know your Edenbrook runs official red light districts, seeking dignity all the way into the brothels? I laughed out of extreme anger, pointing at his nose and spraying. What do you know? Underground secret prostitutes are good women forced into prostitution by gangs, and the old, weak, sick, and disabled are swept out the door. I run official red light districts with clear prices, have herbalists perform regular health checks. If the girls want to go straight, they can leave at any time, and they're guaranteed job assignments at the textile factory. I am walking the path of criminals, leaving criminals with no path to walk. These pads are used once and thrown away, clean and hygienic. I, Silas, risk not wanting my face to promote this throughout the entire empire. Am I wrong? My speech was impassioned and generous, shining with the light of enlightenment thought. The maids around were all mesmerized. Victoria raised her head, her eyes full of admiring little stars. Lord Viscount is highly righteous. I misjudged you. I am willing to help you promote it first among the female officials and in the court. I immediately climbed up the pole, Thank you, princess. The paper mill manufacturing this thing specifically recruits female workers, allowing women to be independent and earn gold coins, no longer having to be appendages to men. These world-shocking feminist remarks directly knocked Victoria dizzy. She was moved to a total mess, turned her head, and had a maid bring out a jewelry box. Inside was full of draft notes from her saved-up private stash. My lord, take this money to build factories. Absolutely do not decline. Unceremoniously, I stuffed the drafts into my sleeve. The princess is of supreme purity and supreme goodness. In the future, I will cover all your paths of purity. By the way, let me mention it's 10 copper coins apiece for noble ladies and 3 copper coins apiece for ordinary maids. Don't remember it wrong. Edward watched from the side, his eyes almost popping out. This brother's scamming techniques are absolute. He grabbed my sleeve. Silas, count me in. I looked at him sideways. Wasn't His Highness just despising it as perverted? Edward's face didn't redden and his heart didn't skip a beat, speaking with righteous awe. I've thought it through. I am the crown prince, I should naturally take the lead. Not only will palace maids use this thing, attendants with hemorrhoids must also use it. The female family members of the civil and military officials of the Privy Council must buy it. Not buying it is immoral. It'll give them a discount, 15 copper coins apiece. Watching him waving his hands and dancing calculating the accounts, I secretly gave a thumbs up. This kid has amounted to something. Morning court the next day. With a single-tube telescope tucked behind my waist, I strolled into the ranks. Just as the routine finished, Finance Minister Giles jumped out, shouting sternly, "Your Majesty, this subject wishes to impeach Silas on 3 major crimes. Firstly, privately expanding the castle's high walls, overstepping the lordly regulations. Secondly, forcibly abducting serfs from surrounding territories into Edenbrook. Thirdly, not paying the tithe for 7 years. I beseech your Majesty to punish him severely." I was calm and composed. Just this? Just these stale, rotten sesame seed matters? Richard looked at me. Silas, what do you say? This subject has nothing to say. Giles became anxious and quickly shouted, "Your Majesty, the witness is outside the hall." A chubby figure was brought into the grand hall. As soon as Thomas, the consul of Oaktown, saw me, his eyes turned red. "Your Majesty, this subject was originally the mayor of Oaktown. Silas lied about borrowing people, exchanging our town's old, weak, sick, and disabled for the young people in his territory. As a result, those young people arrived in our town, walking around every day holding white flour oat bread and roast meat, sleeping when full, eating when awake. The ministers felt their scalps go numb listening. This is feeding the pigs full and sending them back to someone else's pig pen to show off. Too wicked." Wiping his tears, Thomas cried heartrendingly. The young people in our town all went crazy with craving, and in less than a year, they all ran off to Edenbrook. Oaktown's population drained, and it was directly downgraded to Oak Village by the province. Later, I drove their people away, and Silas sent the old, weak, sick, and disabled back, boasting on the streets every day about how good Edenbrook is, and half the people ran away again. Oak Village has now been downgraded to Oak Manor. Some in the hall couldn't hold it back and laughed out loud. Chief Steward Godfrey's face was completely purple from holding back. Thomas broke down crying. That's not all. Later, Silas built an underground pipe and shoved it directly into our manor's river, discharging fecal water into it every day. The river water couldn't be drunk anymore, and they actually drove carriages pulling Edenbrook's well water over to sell. "Your Majesty, he is a devil." The laughter abruptly stopped. The way the ministers looked at Thomas was full of sympathy. To be stuck with such an evil neighbor was truly 8 lifetimes of bloody bad luck. I chuckled. "Then you still have to thank me, going from a village chief to a manor administrator so leisurely." Thomas stamped his feet in anger. My face turned solemn, and I turned to kneel on one knee to Richard. "Your Majesty, he says I abducted, but it's clear the serfs came voluntarily. As for discharging fecal water after fermentation, that is top-tier fertilizer for farmlands. Other nobles can't even fight to get it. Those consuls can't even feed the commoners full. Is it wrong for me to take the people over?" Giles roared angrily. "Sophistry. If you want to provide relief, why not give money and grain? Why must you take the people away? What exactly are your ulterior motives?" I abruptly pointed at Thomas, filled with righteous indignation. "Everyone, please look. This person has big ears and a fat head, a brain full of intestines and fat. Yet the commoners under his rule are thin as bones. Can I feel at ease handing money and grain to a parasite like him? Lock him in the dungeon and starve him for a month. If he's still this fat, he'll plead guilty." Thomas despaired. "I was born fat. Is it a crime to be fat?" I ignored him, looked up at the ceiling at 45 degrees, my voice passionate and grief-stricken. "This subject has a heart of pure loyalty. I never imagined I would still be impeached. This subject reads classical literature for no other reason than for the gods to defend the truth, to fight for bread for the commoners, to continue the glory for the empire, and to initiate eternal peace for all generations. This subject also has a great dream, and that is common prosperity for the entire empire." As soon as my voice fell, Richard slammed the table and stood up, so excited his face turned completely red. Good, well said. Silas is truly the bulwark of the empire. The ministers felt as uncomfortable as if they had eaten flies. This shameless dog thing, pretending to be some radiant knight. Seeing the situation, Giles bit down on the last charge. Your Majesty, how to explain the tax evasion and tax fraud. I frankly touched my chest. Replying to Your Majesty, Edenbrook's gold coins were all smashed into basic education and road building. To make the commoners literate, the territory's treasury is so poor it clinks. For the omitted taxes, this subject accepts the penalty. Richard breathed a sigh of relief and pushed the boat along the current. Considering Silas' outstanding political achievements, fine him 1 year's salary, let this matter be dropped. Giles stepped back. Grand Scholar Reginald immediately jumped out, his face full of killing intent. This subject has a memorial to present. Silas poisoned 54 royal prisoners. I beseech Your Majesty to punish him severely. Total silence in the venue. The ministers retreated in fear, looking at me as if looking at a cold-blooded killer. Reginald spoke with tears and a snotty nose. Your Majesty, this subject has found out that Silas took the crown prince to the dungeon and abused lynchings, using alchemical poisons to poison over 50 people to death. What's even more terrifying is that the dead sternums were completely shattered, entirely from him abusing the corpses and pressing on them after they died. He even took the crown prince to assault Chief Physician Hugo. I beseech Your Majesty to severely punish this poisonous human butcher. Richard's brows locked tightly, staring dead at me. Silas, what explanation do you have? I sighed. This subject did indeed poison 54 people, but that was to test new medicines for the princess. Although the medicine failed, the princess' illness is cured. Reginald sneered. If the medicine failed, how did the princess get better? And how do you explain the corpse abuse? I rolled my eyes. In medicine, that's called cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Emergency chest compressions can save lives. As for those 54 people, Your Majesty, the first one was Mad Dog Font, who tortured and murdered a noble family of 5, not even sparing a 3-year-old girl. There were also 3 roaming criminals who specialized in eating infants' hearts seeking immortality, and vivisected 2 pregnant women. This bunch of scum wouldn't even be wronged if sent to the stake. Using them to test medicines is letting them off cheap. The hall was silent. The ministers felt a chill down their spines listening. This bunch of heretic beasts indeed deserved to die. Richard's brows also relaxed. Although they deserve to die, you shouldn't have bypassed the Supreme Court to use lynchings. Considering you cured the princess, merits and demerits offset. Reginald became anxious. Then what about assaulting Physician Hugo? Such disregard for the law. Lord Grand Scholar, what else do you want to ask? He'll tell you. Crown Prince Edward, with a sunken face, strode down the marble steps. Reginald was furious. Crown Prince, speak carefully. How can you call him brother? Fine, then he'll call him mentor. Edward ignored him and turned to look at Richard. Father, Reginald says the mentor led me astray. I will now recite the classics for you to hear. Edward took a deep breath and started reciting upon opening his mouth. 1 piece, 2 pieces. In one breath, he recited a full 20 obscure higher Latin scriptures, without a single mistake. The whole audience was shocked. That crown prince, who couldn't even write the common tongue well, had actually turned his nature. Wild with joy, Richard tested him on several complex theological exegeses, and Edward answered fluently. Edward proudly raised his head. Father, this was all taught by Mentor Silas. As for assaulting Hugo, it's because that greedy old dog spent 2,000 gold coins to buy a new continent plant tuber worth only 2 silver coins. As soon as these words came out, the whole court was shocked. Edward unleashed his full firepower. I followed the vine to get the melon, dispatching knights out of the palace to check prices. Eggs that cost 10 silver coins each inside the palace only cost 5 copper coins outside. Last year, the palace's food expenses were 80,000 gold coins. According to market prices outside, we wouldn't even need 8,000. The price difference of over 70,000 gold coins was completely embezzled by this group of parasites wearing gorgeous coats. I went incognito to the lower city and saw it. The commoners don't have enough to eat. I donated all my private stash money. Yet it is still a drop in the bucket. If corruption could be investigated and dealt with in the palace, why would the people have to live so bitterly? You could hear a pin drop in the entire grand hall. Looking at Edward, my heart was greatly comforted. This kid has really grown up and possesses the aura of a king. Richard's tiger eyes contained tears. He firmly grasped Edward's shoulders, his voice trembling. You did all this by yourself? Yes. While the mentor returned to his territory to visit relatives, I personally investigated it. Richard violently turned around, secretly wiped away his tears, turned back, and laughed loudly. Good. Lords, look, this is the son of me, Richard, the future lion of the empire. The ministers knelt on one knee, hailing the crown prince as sagacious. Prime Minister Ward shed old tears, repeatedly sighing that he had misjudged me, and that Silas truly possessed great loyalty that resembled treachery. Richard waved his grand hand. Godfrey, thoroughly investigate internal corruption for me. Silas has merit in teaching the crown prince. Reward him with the royal purple gold cloak. Dismiss Reginald. The Royal Academy is solely managed by Silas. The crown prince is permitted to freely leave the palace to inspect the civilian populace. Reginald collapsed limply on the ground, his face ashen. Seeing the timing was ripe, I pulled out the single-tube telescope from my lower back and held it high with both hands. Your Majesty, this subject has a divine artifact to offer. This is the Eye of the Empire, forged at a cost of 10,000 taels of silver. With one glance, one can clearly see enemy banners miles away. I wish my Valoria Empire martial prosperity. Richard, pleasantly surprised, accepted the telescope, walked out of the hall to try it, and immediately thought of it as a heavenly object. A divine object. If used on the battlefield to observe formations, one can surely anticipate the enemy's moves. Silas, I want to reward you. My face was full of modesty. It is all the Edenbrook craftsman's loyalty to your majesty. This subject does not dare ask for a reward. Richard laughed heartily. Bestow 100 pounds of gold upon Edenbrook, mass-produce them from now on, and supply the royal knights first. I struck it rich. I forcefully suppressed the corners of my mouth to thank him for his grace. As soon as court was dismissed, Edward pulled me back to the palace, unable to wait. Brother, you're too disloyal, not showing me such a good thing first. I snatched back the telescope. What's the rush? Let me ask you, while I was gone, where did you spend all your money? Edward triumphantly pulled out a small booklet covered in red handprints. I inquired about the suffering of the commoners in the lower city. Seeing they didn't have enough to eat, I distributed all the money to them. This is the parchment scroll of gratitude with the handprints of the commoners. Everyone is grateful to me. Silas, I am now a superhero in the royal capital. Looking at this prodigal son, I was speechless for a while. Just throwing money around directly, it would be weird if he wasn't treated as a sucker. Edward suddenly leaned over, rubbing his hands and asking, Brother, when can our pad of purity make money? I have no money to do good deeds. I want to make fast money. Can one get addicted to handing out money? But mentioning making money, I got energetic. Now that Reginald had rolled away, and the crown prince could casually leave the palace, the entire noble circle of the royal capital was my ATM. I stared at him with shining eyes. Recently, are there any festivals coming up? Hearing there was money to be made, Edward's eyes instantly lit up like light bulbs, and he couldn't wait to lean in front of me. Silas, the Midsummer Valentine's Day is coming right up. How are we going to pull off a big one?